Raven Varith, a lowborn noble, charged with the grievous sin of inciting a rebellion against the empire, although he and his lineage had committed no transgression whatsoever. And after being condemned to obtain a reprieve, which is a formal acquittal, he was deployed to combat malevolent entities with the Infernal Legion, where countless souls declared that no man could survive even a single year in that forsaken place. Yet somehow, Raven, through sheer resolve, or perhaps profound hatred, managed to endure for a decade. And there, at the precipice of his existence, he encountered the heir of House, who appeared utterly harmless. But his protector was a magnificent white Wyra. And when the long-awaited reprieve finally, it unfolded before Raven's very eyes. On the final battleground, where he had lingered for a decade, he met his demise. But an unforeseen event transpired. You've likely already discerned that it's progressively challenging for you to peruse that tiny, legitimate little manga. Therefore, I suggest to you Mallever, an application where you can not only read your cherished work, but also numerous others, because there are a plethora of options for you to select where to read within the app, should you be interested. It's available gratuitously on the Play Store, and I'll include the link in the info card, in the description, and in the first pinned comment. And without further ado, let's get to the content. But first, leave a plethora of likes on this video. Let's reach the goal of 1,000 likes. For the next installment, subscribe to the channel so we can reach 50,000 subscribers. And if you're inclined to support the channel financially, become a part of our membership community, where you'll gain access to a special role and an exclusive chat in our Discord server. That's all for now. The tale commences with a man engaged in combat against a colossal avian creature. With his blade, he cleaves its head in two, and this scene discloses that he vanquished not just that beast, but also numerous other monsters. And one of these behemoths remarks that to overcome so many demons single-handedly, it can only be the ravenous, deadly Avenge. And Raven immediately casts a glacial glare at the beast. With a single stroke of his blade, he severs its head. He remarks that he's finally arrived. Only a fortnight remains. If he can survive, he will at last reclaim his freedom. He can depart from this place and restore his family's estate, his lineage. Subsequently, he returns to the encampment of the demonic task force, where he encounters numerous individuals, captives, soldiers, many intoxicated. He contemplates the past decade, pondering how truly infernal these days have been in the demonic task force. Those who were dispatched there are fated to eternally combat demons. It's the direst fate one can receive in the Empire. The members of the force are almost entirely criminals and enslaved individuals. Only the absolute worst, people who disregard their own lives and don't worry about the future. Two soldiers remark that he slaughtered all his subordinates and returned alone once more, and he's even admired for being so resilient, despite his noble lineage. And on his journey, he encounters an elderly man who comments on his arrival and inquires why he's being ignored. But our young man grits his teeth, retorts only that the old man seems to have a death wish, which greatly irritates the old man. But at that moment, Raven delivers a swift kick to the old man's stomach and levels his blade at the other man's throat, inflicting a minor laceration. He then approaches the third man. Seizing his head, he slams it into the ground, creating a gaping hole around his head. While the old man lies vanquished, he positions his sword directly against the old man's neck and states that if he desires to perish before being devoured by demons, he can always rely on him. As the old man watches him depart, he vows to remember this. Meanwhile, Raven ponders the rumors circulating amongst his comrades. They say he's the former royal noble who fell from grace and wouldn't survive a year, but ultimately transformed into a monster that persevered for a decade. And although they are hearsay, these accounts are not inaccurate. House Varith, while not of significant renown, existed within the realm, but everything crumbled and they forfeited all. And Raven recollects that day approximately 10 years prior, when he witnessed his dwelling ablaze, and a man proclaiming that House Varith had revolted against the Empire. And according to him, the repercussions of such a foolish act should be demise, while a frantic Raven insisted they had committed no offense, yet he was still imprisoned, and that man asserted that he was a simpleton for not acknowledging his own transgressions. As Raven endeavored to clarify that the entire affair was merely a misunderstanding, that the other houses were the true masterminds behind everything, and they were unjustly entangled in the situation, the man placed his hand upon Raven's head and declared that his father and Mother had already been cleansed. He insinuated that he could reduce Raven to ashes as well, alongside the others, but he would proffer an alternative. If he were to combat demons for a decade within the demonic task force, he could remain among the living. Raven merely overheard the nobles murmuring about it. They whispered that this was the Empire's most deplorable faction, one rife with savages and delinquents. And for a member of royalty to be relegated to such a place, this signified the demise of House Vera. Yet, our resolute young man inquired, if he truly battles demons for a decade, he can live. And that individual states that if he succeeds, after all of this, he will be at liberty to do as he pleases. And so, Harry declares that he comprehends and will undoubtedly persevere. And afterward, he will restore House Vera. Absolutely, he will prevail. And interrupting his reminiscence, he proclaims that his days of misfortune are nearing their end, recalling how, since being cast away there, he fought against demons without instruction or proficiency, and yet he endured. And from a frail, impoverished youth, he transformed into a demon slayer over the past decade. And he concludes that the next widespread extermination, this will be his final confrontation. Just one more stride separates him from liberation and the restoration of his homestead. And then the scene transitions to the domain of House Pendragon. Amidst the Anchorwood forest, a flaxen-haired lad stands before an alabaster dragon. The dragon proclaims, "My knight, the moment to honor our oath is fast approaching." Indeed, as the young boy gazes upon the colossal dragon, visibly awestruck. And so, the chronicles recount that these dragons are entities mightier than any manner of demon, perhaps even the most formidable life forms to ever tread upon the earth. And only one house possesses the ability to utilize them as familiars. House Pendragon, due to their prowess and dragon mastery. This house wields considerable sway within the Empire, being one of the most distinguished. And so, the scene shifts back to a few days prior to Ravi receiving his pardon. And currently, he's making his way towards the commander's tent. Upon arriving, he announces his return, and a young man remarks that he's returned solo once again. He's renowned as the Grim Reaper. The elder inquires about the mission report, and Raven, with a grave expression, explains that a formidable number of demons are on the front lines, and that should they encounter the main forces, the prospects of victory will be virtually non-existent. The old man then replies that, although Raven is stating that he won't be able to defeat them single-handedly, tomorrow, House Pendragon will arrive to provide aid, and furthermore, they will bring their most formidable, a magnificent dragon. And Raven is astonished, and inquires if truly such a terrifying creature will fight alongside them. To which the elder affirms, stating that for generations, the Pendragons have tamed dragons, and that the white dragon will confront the demons on their behalf. And so, Raven contemplates House Pendragon, recognizing them as the Empire's most influential family, with imperial blood coursing through their veins. And incredulous, he ponders if this tale is indeed reality, or merely a legend. After all, who would be capable of wielding a dragon as a mere familiar? Raven, who has devoted his twilight years to combating demons, has never encountered a dragon in his lifetime, and he finds it incredulous that Baltai, typically skeptical, would succumb to a fairy tale, and even contemplates whether the elder has perhaps lost his sanity. However, Ragma had heard tell that the head of House Pendragon perished, which resulted in the family forfeiting significant influence in recent years. Therefore, he concedes that it's challenging to place faith in this information. But Baltai then asserts to Raven that he lacks the authority to decline, as it is a directive. Furthermore, he won't be required to enter the battlefield on the following day. And a bewildered Ravi inquires what Baltai is implying, and the elder elucidates that with a dragon as their ally, he will handle the demons himself. Thus, Raven will only have to deal with the Pendragon brat. And Raven, clearly irritated, says that's enough. And Bao is there, grinning at him. He simply orders him to never leave his side. And so, Ravi simply replies that he understands and will do as instructed. And so, Balti begins speaking. Now, he must present himself to the future Duke, and he's counting on him tomorrow. And our group is approaching the Pendragon tent, gazing at the dragon emblem. He thinks he actually came, but he doesn't understand why a royal would bother coming to a wretched place like this. But Baltai called him a brat. So, he contemplates whether he'll have to attend to a spoiled child, but he dismisses it, saying it's inconsequential. It's irrelevant if he triumphs or fails tomorrow. As long as he manages to survive, he will finally be liberated. And so, he parts the tent flap, apologizing for the intrusion. But at that moment, an enigmatic voice inquires as to his identity, and he trembles to his core, wondering what manner of voice this could be. It doesn't resemble human speech, but nevertheless, he kneels and expresses his remorse for disturbing, without prior notice. He inquires if he is addressing the young lord of house, and the voice confirms that he is indeed a Pendragon. And now, it commands him to state his name and purpose, and our protagonist states that he's the esteemed commander of the 12th Squadron of the demonic operational forces, and he's been entrusted with safeguarding the young lord in the impending battle. Therefore, he's come to introduce himself to your excellency, and that voice declares that such formalities are unnecessary and merely requests that he be prepared and retire for the night. While Raven contemplates this, the voice inquires if he has anything further to add, and our young man questions whether he hasn't brought his dragon. The firepower a dragon commands is crucial for tomorrow's engagement, and the voice instructs him to remain calm. The dragon will undoubtedly be present to assist tomorrow. Then he requests permission to take his leave, and Raven confirms his understanding and departs, pondering if he's truly a mere child, and how a member of the refined elite could venture alone to such a desolate location. It's something he's never encountered before, but he dismisses it as inconsequential. It's not as if he'll encounter this individual beyond tomorrow anyway. And so, the following day, Baltai informs the company that the young Lord Pendragon will arrive imminently, but he fails to materialize. And so, Baltai summons him once more. Only then, the tent is utterly obliterated, and everyone is left astonished, baffled by the tent's sudden destruction. But as they gaze upward, they perceive a colossal eye observing, and Raven, utterly astounded, recognizes it as a magnificent white dragon who was concealed within the pavilion. And at last, the youthful Lord Pendragon materializes before them and introduces himself as Aaron Pendragon and states, without further ado, that the demon's subjugation shall commence now. And following Aaron's arrival, our protagonist contemplates, according to the demonic task force, the large-scale demon subjugation will enlist the aid of House Pendragon, assisted by the magnificent white dragon. He proclaims that the demons will be vanquished in the blink of an eye. Then the scene shifts to the Lobation Prairie, the demon subjugation grounds, where our hero requests that the young lord refrain from action on his own accord, as he is unaccustomed to combat while safeguarding someone and brandishing his blade. He prepares to confront the demons on land, while the white dragon handles those in the sky. And there he is, gazing directly at those wolves. He refers to them as curs and commands them to attack. And he proceeds to slay the wolves one by one, and glancing skyward, he witnesses the dragon vanquishing numerous monsters with potent azure flames that effortlessly incinerate the demons. And observing from a distance, he remarks that the dragon is genuinely terrifying, confirming for himself the existence of a magnificent white dragon. And he declares to Aaron that it doesn't matter what kind of demon, none of them are a match for a dragon. And he always assumed it was merely a fable. But it appears to be true, and as he gazes, a multitude of demons swarm behind him. However, that lone dragon managed to vanquish most of them. As he observes the spectacle of all the demons, consumed by flames, engulfed in the azure fire of the white dragon, Siri contemplates that the battle was excessively effortless, thanks to the dragon, and their triumph is practically assured. He's incredibly fortunate that his final assignment proved to be so straightforward. But then, that dragon alights behind Aaron, and our protagonist inquires if the young lord is injured in any way, and Aaron replies that everything isn't all right yet, with a rather peculiar tone. Then, our protagonist declares that the battle will conclude in an instant, but when he discerns, they are besieged by a multitude of aerial demons, and remarks, this is a dire situation. They're the last remaining survivors. And so, he commands the young lord to direct the dragon to assault those demons. And when he observes Aaron conversing in a tongue he doesn't comprehend with the dragon, and these two close their eyes, affirming each other's intentions, and our protagonist, endeavoring to safeguard Aaron, simply thinks there are so many of them, and implores, please, white dragon, obliterate them. This dragon elevates its head towards those demons, but in this instant, it merely closes its eyes, and those demons commence their assault, and essentially begin to flay him alive, and essentially start to render his flesh raw. As Raven remains bewildered by the unfolding events, he finds himself incredulous that those diminutive demons have managed to wound the dragon. He erupts in a shout, demanding to know why the dragon isn't retaliating. While Eren remains silent, our protagonist seizes Eren by the collar and addresses the young lord, inquiring what in the world is happening. Just then, a massive detonation occurs, and as he comprehends the situation, a multitude of other demons are pursuing them. Our hero exclaims that the demons should have been nearly eradicated, yet why are so many remaining? And so, the demons commence their assault on Eren, and our protagonist as well. But he manages to defend himself, and after that intense struggle, he firmly believes that dragons truly are the most formidable beings in existence. And regardless of the demon's type, it's no match for a dragon. He recalls his thoughts from moments ago. As long as he's beside a dragon, victory is assured. But he's to blame for falling for such a delusion and letting his guard down. He regrets his foolishness deeply. And now, he's utterly exhausted from battling these demons. Then he notices the dragon impaled with 2 stakes, and it's bleeding profusely. He can only utter, "What a catastrophe." Following that, he witnesses a gruesome scene of numerous demons devouring the deceased humans. And as he realizes this, 3 goblins are in hot pursuit. And as they lunge to strike him, he manages to bisect them once more. But he's hemorrhaging profusely. Even though he vanquished the majority of those beasts, exhaustion overwhelms him. He believes himself utterly depleted, devoid of strength. A gaping wound festers deep within him. Should he collapse now, he'll never rise again. But then, his gaze shifts towards the dragon. He declares them both fools. He approaches the white dragon and inquires if it's truly deceased. The dragon remains silent, seemingly lifeless indeed. And then it dawns on him that Eren still lives, expectorating blood, and he gazes directly at him, who is clearly on the verge of death. But our protagonist looks at him and commands him to speak before he expires, because the dragon ceased its assault mid-strike. And at that instant, he realized that he had directed the dragon to perform some action, and he inquires as to what he did. However, Eren remains silent, but then he erupts into a shout, exclaiming that they would have triumphed if the dragon hadn't halted its attack prematurely. He urges him to speak quickly, demanding why he did. But at this moment, he's struck squarely in the back, and he commences to cough up blood. And as he collapses to the ground, someone announces that, although his heart has been pierced, he's still alive, and he truly lived up to his moniker, the immortal Ravenvard. And when he discerns who's behind him, assaulting him, it's Baltai. He inquires why Baltai is doing this. And Baltai begins ranting, proclaiming he'll finally finish things. Then this immense army commences its attack, and when he looks, it's the Imperial Legion. He wonders why Baltai is commanding them. Character name, chuckling, tells him not to be so astonished. This was all orchestrated from the very beginning. He then aims his weapon at Eren's neck, and concludes by stating that some fools refuse to yield. Eren simply stares at him. As he closes his eyes, Baltai starts to laugh maniacally before Raven's eyes. And Raven doesn't grasp the situation. And Bautista, still mocking him, says it's a pity, but that boy's demise was preordained long ago, as was yours. Then he starts kicking Raven and continues to taunt him, saying he was so close. Isn't that right, Raven? Just a little bit more, and he would finally attain his freedom. He seizes him by the hair and asks if it wasn't excruciatingly painful. Your physical capabilities are exceptional, and your regenerative abilities are phenomenal. Which leaves Raven utterly astonished by his words. So you knew, Bautista states. I feigned ignorance for the sake of this day. However, even with such potent regenerative capabilities, if he slits his throat, he'll end up perishing. Isn't that right? And he, chuckling, remarks it's a shame he'll expire here, without attaining his long-desired liberation. Ravi grits his teeth, contemplating that to become unfettered and restore his household for the sake of this objective. He's been striving for a decade, but nevertheless, this isn't analogous to what transpired that time, and he reminisces about 10 years prior, as that fellow degraded him before everyone. And he muses that the feeble and powerless are the ones who must endure such indignities, and those who must perish in places like this. He becomes frantic, realizing he was so close. And this Umbaltai utters his name and declares he'll divulge a secret. In truth, the uprising the Varith clan had to contend with for the past decade, your induction into the demonic special forces, and your demise, as well as that of the Pendragon Brat. It was all orchestrated, and Ravi is bewildered at this moment and inquires what in the world he's talking about. And I even started to kick him again and say that the only thing they didn't anticipate was for the dragon to be so feeble. But it's all part of someone's scheme. He, laughing, simply says, "Farewell, little Raven." And when Raven perceives that the weapon has already been hurtling towards his neck, he simply has his head severed. After that entire battle, the dragon, seemingly lifeless, finally unlids its eyes and wrenches the stakes from its body. And it gazes upon the heads of both Eren and Raven. And then it proclaims that all prerequisites have been fulfilled, and the blood of all those fallen begins to be absorbed, and the dragon, soaring above that crimson pool in the air, declares, "The blood of 1,000 humans, for the blood of 1,000 demons, for royal blood and dragon blood, and the convergence of sun and moon, I shall now honor my oath." And then the horn amidst its head begins to radiate, and all that luminescence starts to permeate the entire desert. And so, the heads of both Raven and the other character's name is missing in your provided text, fade away. And this, a dragon, gazes at the moon and declares that everything will be in its grasp. Dragon Knight. And just like that, his head is also severed. And after the dragon makes its oath and proclaims that everything will rest in the hands of the Dragon Knight, Raven, seemingly deceased, ponders if he is truly dead, but he denies it. This sensation of being ripped asunder, he still recalls it. It's identical to the feeling he experiences when he regenerates. Therefore, this signifies he's still alive. Then he opens his eyes. He wonders where he is, and it also appears there's something atop his hand. But when he rises, he's utterly bewildered, and the maid addresses him as young master, and she starts to flee, exclaiming that this is dreadful. And she departs shouting that the young master has awakened. He gazes around in bewilderment and wonders, what opulent chamber is this? It's unlike anything he's ever encountered. He ponders, where in the world am I? Just then, the butler enters, startled by the young master's awakening. He immediately inquires, "Are you all right, sir? Do you recognize me?" The boy asks, "Who are these people? And why do they address me as young master?" The butler explains, "We are in Castle Kamha of the Pendragon family, and you, sir, are the young master Eren." Hearing this name, Pendragon, Raven is utterly perplexed. Why is he now Eren Pendragon? He rushes to a basin of water to gaze at his reflection, confirming that he has indeed become young Master Eren. And this attendant remarks that perhaps he has forgotten his own visage, and that he might be disoriented after a protracted slumber, and she implores him not to overexert himself. Then the butler elucidates that he has been unconscious for 3 years since his last engagement, and our Raven, or Eren, ponders that this is improbable, for he distinctly recalls being decapitated. And if he is a semi-immortal, why, instead of simply resurrecting, did he become a Pendragon? At this very moment, a blonde woman enters the chamber, exclaiming that he is her son, and has finally awakened. Both the butler and the maid are elated by the arrival of Lady Helena, who immediately rushes to embrace Eren. The boy, still bewildered, he observes a woman, present since the beginning, vanishes momentarily. He briefly wonders about her identity, but she merely winks at him and implores him to keep silent. Then Helena, Eren's mother, with relief, inquires if he recognizes her. And Raven, now inhabiting Eren's form, ponders his lack of memory. He contemplates whether this is all a dream. The enigmatic woman gestures towards the window, where he spots the white dragon, and upon seeing it, instinctively calls it Sodra. The dragon responds to its name with a roar. It shatters the window pane and lunges towards him. Rovi questions how he knows the dragon's name, and wonders if he perished alongside Eren. If by some chance he was resurrected, but no, he was likely still alive in that condition. So now he comprehends absolutely nothing of what could have transpired. But then his mother intervenes, telling the soldier not to harm her son, and the dragon observes her, while Helena, frantic with worry, is unsure of what to do. Then that enigmatic woman approaches the dragon and attempts to touch it gently. Eren yells for her to leave, and his mother doesn't understand who he's speaking to, while the elderly woman caresses the dragon and winks at him again, which causes him to become even more frightened. His anxious mother implores him to sit down. Thus he surmises that this woman must be some sort of apparition, as it appears only he can perceive her. And in this moment he observes the lady conversing with the dragon in the same tongue that Eren was utilizing with him. At this juncture, Suda closes his eyes and departs, and she merely bids farewell and dissipates, leaving him utterly bewildered, leaving him quite astonished. And a concerned Rod Mindau inquires of Helena if she is all right, and she affirms that she is, calling him by his name, Mel. Well then, she states there's something more crucial, and she proceeds toward Aaron and inquires if he is well, and he's uncertain how to respond to that. He contemplates the opulent castle, the attendants who serve him, and the name of the white dragon that materialized in his thoughts. He persuades himself that he has truly become Aaron Pendragon. Then his mother inquires about what transpired, but Aaron simply reassures her, stating that everything is fine. Thus, his mother and the butler are relieved, and he rises, declaring there's no need to remain so bewildered. He'll have to gather intelligence to better comprehend matters, and securing his hair, he asserts that he isn't like Aaron. Therefore, he must ensure he remains undiscovered. So now, he must commence the collection of information, and after that, our young man begins to ponder the demonic special forces. Special demonic forces, a unit comprised of individuals with virtually no human rights, where the absolute dregs of society were discarded. It's rumored that enduring a single year in that forsaken place is impossible. However, he persevered for a decade, honing both his combat prowess and his preternatural regenerative capabilities, becoming a peerless warrior amongst both demons and humans. And at the bakery and the devastation, in his final confrontation before liberation, the young Lord Pendragon and he were betrayed and forfeited their lives on that battlefield, or at least they should have, for he was reborn in the body of the young Master Aaron. Regressing in time 7 years prior to that conflict, his days were once replete with only bloodshed and grime. But now, those days have utterly transformed. Now he's even being nourished by a maid, which thoroughly irritates him, as she persistently implores him to say, attempting to feed him. He believes he's genuinely being treated like an infant, and he remarks that it has been several days since he awakened, and he is capable of feeding himself. But the maid insists that he is incapable and must remain silent, as those are the physician's directives. She implores him once more to open his mouth and consume. Meanwhile, he believes her name is Lindsay, and she attended to Aaron's daily needs prior to his lapse into a coma. He perceives her to be excessively protective, considering her treatment of him. Thus, he parts his lips, reasoning that, as he is now Aaron, he must maintain this bewildering charade, although he feels quite mortified by it. After ingesting the food, she expresses gratitude, stating he performed admirably, and requests he wait while the medications are being prepared, and she should assist her in dressing, but he asserts that he requires no assistance, and that he's capable of doing it independently. He merely intends to cleanse his face beforehand, and he requests that she fetch some attire from a specific, his hair as he does so. But furthermore, she becomes apprehensive and swiftly steps in front of him, stating that he's not yet capable of walking, since his physique could be injured again, and she requests that he entrust his attire and his tresses to her, and implores him to simply rest. And Aaron acquiesces and asks her to compose herself. Then she commences dressing him, and he contemplates that although he yearned for solitude, he recognizes that everyone does everything for him in this existence, which leaves him quite discomfort. And the maid, observing him motionless, inquires if he has finished changing, and what has transpired. And he replies that it's nothing, and she's relieved to hear this, asking if he requires anything further, to which he retorts that it's quite enough, that he's retiring for the night. But just then, someone intrudes, opening the door, addressing him as brother, and inquires about his well-being. And thus, 2 young ladies, bearing a striking resemblance to him, enter the chamber, and the maid introduces them as Lady Arinya and Lady Mia. However, our protagonist becomes quite vexed because these occurrences invariably transpire at the most inopportune moments. For at that very instant, Mia commences to dash towards him, and Aaron implores her to cease. But alas, she seizes his leg and gazes upon his face with utter delight, and he merely offers her a thoroughly insincere smile. And so, Aaron expresses her apologies on his behalf and inquires if he's capable of ambulating normally. He affirms that he is indeed capable, provided it's merely strolling. The maid retrieves a chair for Arian to be seated. She expresses gratitude and exhibits concern for her sibling, inquiring if they are being disruptive. He's visibly uneasy and denies it. It's all right. Then she states that's wonderful. They were overjoyed to learn of his awakening. Incidentally, the blossoms in the garden have finally commenced bloom. As soon as he's able to depart his chamber, she requests that they view them together. Even the hydrangea he planted is about to blossom as well, and she inquires if he recollects it, because he planted it just prior to lapsing into a coma. Uneasy, he merely thinks, here she goes again. Ever since he feigned amnesia, his sister became incredibly loquacious. But thanks to her, he was able to glean a wealth of knowledge. She described the tumultuous era to him. Instead of mastering swordsmanship, he immersed himself in literature and painting, an individual who favored pursuits like horticulture, but that's sufficient. However, Eren was a timid soul who secluded himself in his chambers to avoid interaction with others. And because of this, not only were his sword skills deficient, but his combat prowess was lacking as well. Thus, rumors began to circulate amongst the other noble houses. The Duke's heir became the subject of ridicule. In secret, he muses unsurprised that House Pedro has fallen into such disrepute. But now, time is reversed, and he's become himself. His physique is that of a 17-year-old youth, approximately a decade younger than when he embarked upon the battlefield. According to the castle's attendant, he succumbed to a coma at the age of 14 and awakened 3 years later. There must have been a rationale for his assuming control of this body while he was comatose. But no, that's not pertinent at this juncture. What's crucial is that he remains alive and has regressed 7 years in time, and he's overjoyed. He solely contemplates the opportunity to rectify everything. And since he was dispatched to the demonic special forces, forfeited his family's honor, and now he's been granted a second opportunity to attain what he couldn't before, and he continues to believe he's powerless. He must act now and contemplate what Baltai had previously stated regarding his family's disgrace. Due to the uprising a decade ago, his induction into the demonic forces and his demise are all interconnected, and he believes that to comprehend what was said, both as Eren Pendragon and Raven Vera, he will fight once more. The mere thought invigorates him, but his sister interrupted his contemplation, stating that Luna's law. But then she realizes he wasn't even listening to her and inquires if he heard what she said. He apologizes, admitting he wasn't paying attention. And so, she continues explaining that Lady Luna is coming to see him. He questions who this Lady Luna is. Distressed, she expresses her apologies, as her brother has lost his memories. She clarifies that Lady Luna is a member of the Pendragon Knights and the adopted daughter of Count Sarid. Furthermore, she is his fiancée. This leaves him utterly astonished. Stunned, he asks what she's talking about. The scene transitions to several knights, heading towards the Pendragon estate. One of them mentions they will arrive at the castle with Hunt, and merely requests her patience for a short while longer. Inside the carriage sits Layla Luna, the rumored betrothed of Eren. The knight continues his discourse, explaining that after 3 years, she will finally encounter her fiancé. He inquires if she might share her current emotional state. This is a knight from Count Sarid's household, Joseph Brandon. She simply releases a sigh and questions why she should divulge such feelings to someone like him. She curtly requests he disregard her emotions and attend to his duties. She glances aside and contemplates Eren Pendragon, a frail and pathetic specimen of the male sex, whose gender appears rather ambiguous. It's the gender of the former Eren Pendragon, truly quite indeterminate. And she continues to believe that even if she goes to see him, he will likely be concealed within the shadows, rendering it impossible to converse with her. And she was betrothed to him, as it was advantageous for her family. However, that concludes today. Her father, Count Surged, finally resolved to terminate the engagement, and the authority of Duke Pendragon has waned considerably. There is no longer any merit for her to wed into a declining house, and from the outset, she never acknowledged such a feeble individual as her fiancé. And truthfully, she feels relieved when her father instructs her to end it with him, and that knight persists in bothering her, stating that there's a motive, although their rationale for going there is to apprise him of the termination. While conveying their apologies, he still contemplates how much young Master Eren has matured, and she simply states that this isn't something he should be concerned with, and that she will converse with him. Therefore, he just needs to remain still without provoking their knights. But he erupts in laughter, asserting that irrespective of any circumstance, that boy, whether the young master has awakened or not, the past glory will never be reclaimed by the House Pendragon. In other words, young Master Eren, unsuccessful in forging a pact with the dragon. Once, he's certain that House Pendragon will only deteriorate from this point forward. But then, he commences to reveal himself to her, declaring that nevertheless, if it were him, he would be capable of achieving greater glory than House Pendragon, and a Pendragon who lacks a dragon. He alone is sufficient too. But at this juncture, she interjects, telling Sir Brandon that he is repulsive, and implores him to depart. He simply states, very well, and offers an apology for his rudeness. As he contemplates if any respectable man exists in both Escadas, Pendragon or Serverge, and she states that they are either feeble or conceited, and she has no fondness for either type. And these individuals arrive at the fortress with Hunt, and upon their arrival, our lads, siblings, and their mother are extending a warm welcome to them. And thus, she greets everyone from the Pendragon Duchy, remarking that it has been a considerable period since her last visit. Meanwhile, our young lady simply gazes at her, utterly ill at ease, and Arya promptly dashes towards her, declaring that she looks more radiant than ever today, and that she is utterly charming. Luna mentions it has been a significant amount of time since they last met, and so Aaron's mother expresses gratitude for her journey, and everyone was eagerly anticipating her arrival. And then Lay requests Aaron to escort her to her chambers, which leaves him quite uncomfortable, and she merely believes him to be truly pathetic, which he isn't, nor capable of offering a proper greeting without his mother by his side, even though he is already a grown man. But then he gazes at her, and approaching closer, states it's been quite some time, and that he will escort her to her chambers now, and requests that she follow him, which leaves her utterly astonished, because he spoke to her, something he'd never done before, and inquires if it's all right if her night would be lodged in separate quarters. However, she hasn't offered him any response yet, and he asks if she was listening, and she, quite startled, simply apologizes. And Frog, it's perfectly acceptable for your night to stay in another room. While Aaron thinks that, from Iron's perspective, this student possesses a quiet and tranquil personality, and her detached demeanor towards her spouse is quite peculiar, whom she hasn't encountered in 3 years. And she contemplates if this is what's considered a merit of convenience. The two arrive at the chamber, and the maid requests that they please enter. As soon as they step inside, the servant inquires if she should prepare some tea. He simply turns and states he'll leave it to her discretion. She acknowledges his instruction, but he gazes at Luna and tells her not to remain standing there, and that she should locate a seat to her liking. She ponders what is transpiring. Previously, he wouldn't even meet her gaze, and now he's engaging in conversation with her and the staff without a single issue. And so, she remarks on how much he's changed, doesn't she? And she states that he doesn't recall anything from the past, but inquires if he remembers her. And he takes a seat and conveys that he has no recollection of anything before awakening. And he apologizes, saying, "My apologies." As she settles into a chair, she contemplates what this implies, that he has forfeited all of his memories, and now I possess a completely distinct personality. Yet, despite this, he has become a virtuous man. As she observes him with a countenance of utter discontent, she merely deems him insignificant in comparison to his former self and his current pathetic quality. Caliber, even the declining House Pendragon can, but at this juncture he gazes at her, he contemplates his current predicament, in which he lacks sufficient intelligence regarding House Pendragon and the neighboring estates. He's uncertain of the repercussions should he provoke conflict with House Seaward. But this woman, just by observing her, appears to be concealing something from the instant they first encountered each other. However, he offers a slight grin, stating it's unavoidable. He must inquire further. Thus, he remarks that he seems genuinely distinct from his former self, Aaron, and his family. The maidservants express the same sentiment. This might be unfair to her, but since my current self doesn't suit her preferences, perhaps they could converse with the Count. But at that moment she declines. However, she expresses her apologies for, which leaves him utterly astonished, and she contemplates her current actions, unsure of her purpose. The decision to annul the engagement has already been made by her father, and she wonders if that's the reason for her visit today, to inform them of the decision. But regardless of how much a person has transformed, there's no way the current House Pendragon can be restored. She simply gazes at him, and thinks that's why, if she doesn't hasten to tell him. But just as he's about to speak to her, the maid arrives. She starts to apologize for returning before preparing the tea. In this, our young lady inquires if something's amiss, and she confirms it's a missive from the Duchess, and she requests the young master, if you please, to proceed to the audience chamber with Lady Sarai. Immediately, he questions the reason, and she simply states that it appears the knight who journeyed here with the lady caused a minor disturbance, and so he gazes directly at her, and she instantly becomes quite apprehensive, thinking this is the worst possible moment. Although she's already confessed up to this point, yet he tells her that she's wearing an expression that's concealing some sort of secret since arriving, and inquires if she didn't come here today with some sort of conspiracy. She attempts to deflect, claiming it's not like that, but thinks she could have simply stated it outright, and that she genuinely should despise him. But he simply gazes at her with this frigid expression and abruptly turns, stating that he'll listen to what she has to say later, and that they must attend to their night first. She contemplates what precisely transpired with him to cause such a drastic transformation. Regardless, she needs to deter Sir Brandon immediately, and if she agrees, she will accompany him. And now they proceed to that chamber, where Rudolph commences shouting at the knight, demanding to know the meaning of this cancellation, if this is truly what Count Sire desires. And the knight, utterly self-assured, affirms and clarifies that they came here to inform young Master Aaron. Meanwhile, Aaron's mother, seated upon her throne, becomes visibly agitated and inquires if the knight is truly prepared to accept the liability for the repercussions that will befall the Pedregum family following this decree. And the knight, with all his ostentatious grandeur, retorts, "Indeed, as a gesture of reconciliation, he declares that the Count intends to relinquish not only the gold and crystal mines within the territorial boundaries, but also 2 lumber mills in the Bryhatch Forest to the Pendragon family." This revelation astonishes both young Aaron and the butler. They inquire, bewildered, "What do you mean?" And the knight, brimming with arrogance, addresses them and states, "It appears the staff and the knights are discontent with this arrangement. So, would you like me to convey a recommendation to the Earl?" This infuriates the servant, and Aaron's mother contemplates the extent of the insult to her family. Currently, the Pendragon family is grappling with financial difficulties, but their family pride would be tarnished if they accepted, and so she immediately declares her refusal of the offer. The man, persisting in his arrogance, inquires if she is certain this could be your final opportunity about restoring his family's honor, and she, utterly exasperated, inquires what he's babbling about. But just then, someone instructs him to hold, and when they glance over, it's our young protagonist entering the grand hall. And as one, all the knights genuflect, and our boy, with an air of self-importance, approaches them. And so, his mother and the handmaidens beam at his arrival, and that one knight merely thinks. Finally, the little brat shows up, and he implores Luna to observe carefully. He will demonstrate that he's more worthy than this whippersnapper. And the boy ascends to his throne, and that knight, attempting to appear dignified, simply states that it's been quite some time since he's seen him, and inquires how things have been proceeding. But then, our boy abruptly interrupts, asking, Who are you?" being utterly presumptuous. And the fellow is stunned speechless, baffled by the unfolding situation. However, he claims to have no recollection of events after awakening. Therefore, he has no memory of this individual. He suspects he's afflicted with memory loss, but simply because his demeanor has shifted, it doesn't alter the fact that he remains a fool, and he will make it abundantly clear the disparity between their stations. Thus, he offers his feigned condolences and declares himself the head knight of the Surej family. But at this juncture, our protagonist commands him to depart, leaving him once more dumbfounded. He states that he has no interest in conversing with someone of his ilk, a mere knight, and that he should take his leave. This leaves him utterly astonished, immediately questioning how the young master dared to utter those words to a commander like him, claiming it's incredibly disrespectful. But our protagonist and his mother, with a profoundly serious expression, simply state that he's the one being impolite by intruding upon their fortress, and inquires if he comprehends or requires a visual aid, and orders him to vanish from his sight. A mere knight, utterly enraged, asserts that he won't reiterate his command, and the knight trembles uncontrollably, merely glancing at him, and becomes consumed by fury. While in the background, Luna sighs, and then he gazes at her and remarks, "So, it seems you were deliberating the annulment." Smiling, he beckons the entourage closer because he desires to converse with the individual in question, and she contemplates, who is unaware that matters would culminate in this way, and contemplates what course of action to take. However, he states that from what he's gathered, she desires to dissolve their engagement in exchange for gold, crystal mines, and 2 lumber mills. And so, he declares that very well, they will consider themselves even. This leaves Luna, her mother, and the attendant utterly bewildered. His mother wonders where he acquired such a phrase, but the attendant inquires of him if he comprehends that this could potentially tarnish the family's reputation, and believes that he should deliberate further before arriving at this decision. And so, he rises full of self-importance and proclaims that there are numerous tasks to be undertaken, that the Pendragon family regain their former glory, and with that expression, he states that it's not the occasion to fret over a mere betrothal. Furthermore, even if they were to take action on this matter, it's improbable the Count will reconsider. Isn't that right? Luna shrinks back, uncertain of what to say, but she contemplates that she should have simply declared her refusal to marry someone like him. Even though she's reluctant to acknowledge it, she's now enamored with Eren, and our protagonist offers her a slight grin and remarks that she appears to be struggling for a response. But he says, well, your opinion is inconsequential to the Sarek family, so she doesn't even need to respond. He'll accept the annulment from the Sarod family. And once again, she's completely speechless, unsure of what to say. And so, our young man turns and inquires of his mother if everything is all right. And she simply nods, confirming that it is. And since he is the head of the Pendragon family, she places her trust in him. This he begins to address everyone present, that as the patriarch of the Pendragon family, he proclaims that the marriage between Eren Pendragon and Luna Sarah is officially annulled, while she remains utterly uncomfortable and that night extremely irate. And after that incident, he begins to stroll through the house, thinking only of the immense headache he has. We must tackle one predicament at a time. And he was further compelled to manage matters such as matrimony, but consider if inquiring about his financial standing was the appropriate course of action. And if they are poised to amass such substantial resources, then there's no justification for refusing the annulment. The crystal mines possess potent magical properties. Thus, they will prove especially advantageous. And whether high-ranking mages will arrive or not will be determined by the mines. Strolling through the castle, he happens upon a portrait of a lady. And upon closer inspection, it's the woman from earlier, the one who dismissed the dragon. He promptly inquires of the maid regarding her identity, and she states that this is the Duke's father's elder sister, Clean Pendragon. She is Aunt Pendragon, and gazing at her, he echoes the name Aunt Pendragon. At this moment, an individual behind him remarks that apparently he uttered her name, Young Pendragon, and when he comprehends, it's the previous lady, and she mentions she has something to inquire of him. And the lady suggests they converse briefly. Thus, he enters the chamber and addresses her. So, Miss Aisha, what brings you here? And she replies that, as he can observe, she is a specter, and having one's name spoken is a prerequisite to communicate with the living. And, filled with glee, she discloses that she is Eren's great aunt. But he stares at her with a look of unease, and considers that despite confronting demons for a decade, this marks the first instance he's conversed with a specter. And ever since he inhabited this vessel, it's been one predicament after another. Then, the lady declares she'll get straight to the crux and inquires as to his true identity, asserting that he isn't the genuine Eren. This instantly astounds him, and she promptly erupts in laughter. She expresses remorse for her menacing tone, clarifying that this revelation doesn't surprise her. On that particular day, upon his awakening, the Southern divulged that he wasn't the authentic Eren, and our young maiden then inquires if she possesses the ability to truly communicate with dragons, and if she comprehends what transpired with him. ADH professes to having no knowledge. The aunt admits to being clueless, and inquires if he could recount how he transformed into Eren, as perceived by the lads. He lapses into silence for a moment, contemplating that since she is a specter, and he is the sole individual who can perceive her, there's no harm in divulging everything. And thus he commences his explanation, stating that although she might find it incredulous, he will reveal all. On the 321st day of June, according to the imperial calendar, he and Eren were killed in action on the Lobation Prairie. At least, that's what he presumed, but when he regained consciousness, he was in this state. He desires to ascertain why he journeyed back in time and was resurrected as Eren. And the lady responds that she grasps the essence of everything. And he inquires if she genuinely believes him. And she states that whether she believes him or not, it doesn't alter the reality that he's already present. And as the Southerner who discovered that he wasn't Eren, then she's certain that this is the situation. But the Eren he was safeguarding in the Lobation Prairie could very well have been a counterfeit Eren. And our protagonist, quite astonished, asks what she means by that. And the lady explains that the Pendragon successors have been making pacts with Soldrick for generations. She inquires if he's ever heard of the significance of the unveiling of a mausoleum, and she says that the Spendragon Mausoleum isn't just a location where the souls of ancestors slumber, but it is a wellspring of power that guarantees the family's destiny with the benediction of the forefathers and the familial spirits of Sodre. Furthermore, the enchanted tower that safeguards the family's secrets is also situated there. In other words, the mausoleum is the quintessence of Pendragon's prosperity, and its unveiling is absolutely indispensable for the family's future. Should this mausoleum remain sealed, the family will fall into decline. And thus, the Anne explained that it is precisely for this reason that the gates of the mausoleum can only be unsealed by an heir who can surpass Sodrake's dominion and forge a covenant with him. And there exists a single opportunity to establish this pact, and should he fail, it must be left to succeeding generations, which is incredibly challenging. Even the formidable Klein and his forerunner, the stout Gord, struggled to forge the covenant, and that's precisely why Aaron, renowned as the feeblest in Spittergon Chronicles, was vanquished by Soderic, and it also explains his comatose state. The likelihood of a successor, who was bested by Soderic, reawakening is exceedingly slim, and the noble white dragon will only pledge allegiance to the individual who directly seizes his authority. Therefore, Aaron engaging in warfare with Soderic and encountering him is utterly improbable. This leaves him profoundly astonished, utterly bewildered, and now he's even more disoriented. But the lady approaches him and states that's not the issue at hand. He immediately inquires what she means by that. She clarifies, explaining that the most crucial matter is Aaron Yeager has awakened with a different spirit inhabiting his body. They question her, asking what she implies. She replies that the body belongs to Aaron, but the soul is that of another person, granting a new opportunity to forge the covenant. This pact she requests of Harvey and Vat. Although there's a scarcity of sufficient troops currently, he must journey to Anchor Forest, where a lair of malevolent monsters resides. He must vanquish the demons that materialize one by one until he reaches the mausoleum in the deepest part of the woods. She instructs him to demonstrate his prowess to the guardian of the mausoleum, Sodrake, and forge a pact with him. And then, as the true heir of Pendragon, she beseeches him to unlock the gates of the family mausoleum. And so, she gazes at him and inquires, "What say you? Do you possess the necessary metal?" He offers a sly grin and replies, "Very well." She's utterly astonished by his immediate compliance. He elaborates, stating that from what he's gathered, unveiling the mausoleum will benefit everyone. And since he's accustomed to vanquishing demons, there's no justification for refusal. Furthermore, restoring the Pendragon family's influence would be exceedingly advantageous for him. Because he harbors his own ambitions, he'll seize any available opportunities that remain attainable. And she's delighted, believing him to be a resolute man who won't hesitate to utilize any necessary measures to accomplish his objective. And she's fascinated by him, but states that naturally she has no objections to him restoring the glory of Pendragon, and that is her aspiration, and she vows not to impede his goals. To which he replies that her presence would be frequent if she were to do so, and now that his subsequent course of action has been determined, he must seize control of the Barcelos family next. But he's quite troubled, stating that due to the past Aaron, his reputation is in shambles, and his authority over military operations is a zone, and the artistry is quite lively. She says he truly comprehends, doesn't he? Although they are supporting the family, there will be those who will mock the family's decline, and she is certain that he must ascertain the loyal subjects and make it known to them that he is the true master of the castle, and he affirms, indeed, he must preside over the vassals and prepare to unveil the mausoleum. And he contemplates whether a fortnight is sufficient. And he, confidently, declares he will do whatever it takes to reign supreme over all. A fortnight passes, and in the interim, our protagonist is honing his swordsmanship and reminiscing about the visceral thrill of monster hunt, the adversary's sheer size, their numbers, their peculiar habits and maneuvers. He envisions himself decapitating a legion of demons, commences practicing with his blade, and contemplates that he cannot depend on his comrades. He must confront every foe single-handedly, lest he meet a similar fate as before. Thus, he vanquishes a multitude of phantom demons with a flurry of deft sword strokes. Meanwhile, his maid, observing from afar, is utterly captivated, and she approaches, proclaiming his extraordinary prowess. And here is a fresh set of garments. He proceeds to change his attire in her presence, and she becomes utterly flustered. As he contemplates his awakening with Aaron, finding himself too feeble to even lift a blade. But after merely days of rigorous training, he recuperated his former physical prowess from his demon hunting days, and the aptitudes for healing and combat were flawlessly inherent. His revival is a miracle in itself, and he is profoundly grateful. Just then, a knight approaches and inquires if he is practicing swordsmanship. He expresses his delight at the knight's change of heart, and since he is indeed training, he proposes a sparring match. He assures him he will exercise restraint. This is Sir Mark Killian. However, he places a hand on his shoulder and addresses Sir Killian, requesting him to withdraw for the moment, since he's orchestrating an even grander spectacle, or perhaps leaving Killian utterly astonished by this maneuver. And they proceed to the castle's main hall, with Hunt, where numerous knights are genuflecting before him. And our protagonist declares, since everyone is assembled, he has a crucial proclamation to make. He announces that he will soon unveil the mausoleum, leaving everyone instantly stunned. A knight addresses the young lord and states that to accomplish this, he must purge the entire Anchor Forest. Reaching the gateway, they vow to obey his every command, but he's only trained for a few days and wonders if this quest will be too arduous for him on this expedition. But Eri interjects, telling him to disregard that matter, and requests that he elaborate on the circumstances near the gate. And the knight remarks, "It's been dreadful since the commencement of the year. Not only have the monsters run amok, but brigands have also been acting with impunity, and each town has assembled a kind of vigilante group to counter this threat. But it's merely a matter of time until the gates crumble and the monsters and bandits breach the defenses." And Aaron declares, "Regardless of how perilous the territory, I cannot disregard this." And the butler implores, "Please do not be too hasty." After recouping some of the family's fortune, utilizing the Cristal Mine, he contemplates whether it wouldn't be more prudent if Circle had devised some strategies. But our young protagonist asserts, firstly, there are no available men adequate to safeguard and manage the crystal quarry. Ultimately, they'll have no alternative but to reopen Reina, but they're short on time. They depart in a fortnight. He informs everyone the expedition commences in 2 weeks. But then, the knight interjects, stating that he would have no qualms if he spearheaded the operation. But Killer remains stoic, merely observing him, and inquires what in the world he's talking about, questioning if his leadership is so preposterous. He becomes enraged, exclaiming there's always a counter-argument. And so, he asks Sir Keelha if they should spar. Sir Keelha responds that he's prepared a grand arena for him to train once more, and inquires if that's acceptable to the young master. The undertaking cannot endure with a commander who solely enjoys perusing literature and artistry. But Aaron declared he speaks excessively, and with his blade, lunges towards Killian. However, he parries at the final moment. Yet he believes the strike was tremendously forceful. But our young protagonist gazes at him and commands him, as a knight, to communicate through his swordsmanship. And these two commence their duel. Our lad executes numerous maneuvers, performs a mighty leap to land a mortal blow upon Killian, and he contemplates concluding the battle, which he manages to defend. But then he retaliates against Aaron and proclaims that it's impossible for a child who's never trained and remained unconscious for years to vanquish him. Our protagonist remains utterly stoic, yet he then draws his blade, and Killian presumes the duel is concluded. But then our hero cracks a subtle grin and sheaths his weapon once more. But when Killian comprehends, he's already been struck squarely in the abdomen, which renders him completely breathless and even forces his tongue to protrude. And our young champion observes him collapsed on the ground, which leaves the knights, or perhaps more damn, utterly astonished. Jesse declares he will speak again. They will depart in a fortnight, and he will forge a covenant with the White Dragon and unseal the mausoleum. And should they have any objections, let them speak now. Yet everyone instantly kneels and proclaims they have no dissent. And now, within the guest chambers, the knight approaches Lady Luna, and he states that even if this is Pendragon territory, Pendragon, because she declared that she would accompany Prince Aaron on the expedition, asserting that the cancellation has already been established. And regardless of how much the young lord has transformed recently, he will contribute nothing of value to the undertaking. And he inquires, shouldn't she simply return to her domain? Regarding her escort, she retorts that she despises when he behaves this way, always condescendingly disparaging others. But it appears he has misunderstood something, and she states that she will elucidate for him why she remains in this castle, and proclaims that Pendragon is kin to her family, and she is officially one of the 5 ducal houses of the empire, one of the 2 families who inherited the emperor's bloodline. And although the annulment was established to comprehend the future gains and losses of the Serud family, it's imperative to observe the Pendragon's potential, and it wouldn't be prudent to return to your territory now. The rather irritated knight only hears her say that when Duke Aaron departs, she will accompany him. But then he states that he understands, but says she should only accompany the expedition as far as Bellet Gate, and that please promise to return with him afterward. And she says yes, she will. But she ponders if the Duke, who has become a completely different person, can successfully unlock the mausoleum, the Pendragon family will restore their honor. And she's blushing crimson, completely preoccupied with witnessing his prowess firsthand. She needs to see his capabilities with her own eyes. She's utterly smitten with our protagonist after facing rejection. And so, Brendo becomes utterly enraged, believing that the young man is utterly worthless. And after humiliating him, he's truly driving his lady mad with desire. And he's seething with envy, lacking any advantage. He merely implores him to observe carefully. He will demonstrate the sheer brutality of the outside world during the expedition. And so, a fortnight passes, and 15 days have elapsed. And our young hero is fully equipped to embark upon the expedition. However, his mother starts sprinting, crying out his name, and her embrace is a plea for his safe return. For that is all that matters. He embraces her back and assures her he will definitively come back after conquering both the dragon and the mausoleum. And she begins to weep, insisting that he absolutely must return. And when he glances behind her, his sisters are also shedding tears. Uncomfortable, he simply says everything will be all right, and he will return without fail. Then the maid announces it's time to depart, and he confirms, yes, they will embark at this moment. And this pompous individual mounts his steed, looking at Killian, his maid, that arrogant knight, and also Luna. He is poised to depart, and the butler approaches him and requests permission to present the esteemed mourning sword of the widow. He grasps it, feeling the touch of the blade, and contemplates that he will reclaim the Pendragon family's influence with this conflict and fulfill the Vartha family's long-held aspiration to shed the stigma of being branded as traitors to the empire. He will champion his cause once more, and they brandish their swords and declares to all the soldiers that they must advance into battle for the glory of the Pendragon family. And so, Aaron, assuming Aaron is a character's name, all the knights begin to charge towards the mausoleum. They've now penetrated the forest depths and are already engaging a host of demons. Killian announces a demonic horde lies ahead, and our protagonist simply commands, obliterate them all, and with his blade, he severs the heads of those grotesque creatures with effortless ease. He urges them onward, show no hesitation, advance. His words invigorate the entire company, even Luna, who becomes even more enamored with him. They arrive at Fort Bellet's gate, and he calls for an immediate halt. He declares his intent to assess the situation within. He beckons Killian to follow and instructs his men to rest and await further commands. As he dismounts his steed, the maid remarks on his arduous labor. Covered in grime, she requests that she kindly take a glass of water. But then, he discerns that she's truly in a state of disarray. He begins tidying up her mess, which makes her momentarily flustered. He simply states that she should also rest and cleanse her face and take a respite. But she insists she doesn't require it, and he merely tells her it's a directive and that he will remain alone so she can retire and relax. Completely crimson, she simply utters, all right. And this book is traversing Fort Bellet and contemplates that the predicament here is far more dire than he had envisioned. They don't possess any location remotely close enough to provision the fort in terms of personnel and supplies. And as he ambles along, he ponders that the soldiers' gear is in a deplorable condition, and he even favored the equipment from when he was battling demons at that encampment. He recalls that Fort Bellet is a critical stronghold in this territory, and it appears the knights, under their commanders, aren't taking their duties seriously. And this one summons Serkia and inquires about the commander's whereabouts, and the knights. And Serkia becomes quite perturbed by this. After explaining the circumstances, Aaron becomes extremely agitated, wondering if the knights truly abandoned the soldiers and deserted their posts. And this individual confirms precisely that. He was apprised of this the previous day, and they've devolved into a band of brigands. The remaining military forces are a collection of useless individuals. They're a hopeless bunch of incompetents. and our extremely irate young man simply declares them a pack of worthless scoundrels, undisciplined and unruly, and this bids farewell to Killian and commands him to apprehend them this very day and to ready his men immediately, because he will personally decapitate every last one of these wretches. Now the scene shifts to the southern village, at the deserted monastery, and there we find the knights they were discussing, heavily imbibing, and one of them mentions hearing that the Pendragon brat, and one of them speaks up that he's heard tell of the incompetent Pendragon. Pendragon, he's awakened, and now is an opportune moment, since he's grown weary of slaughtering all the women and children there. He contemplates what kind of visage he'll don when he confronts him now. The scene shifts back to the Duke's chambers at Bennett Gate, where he's conversing with Killian. That night, he states that for tomorrow's subjugation, he would like to augment the troops, but Killian explains that unfortunately, there's no possibility, as it could lead to a deficiency in command among the soldiers assigned to safeguard the barriers. However, he proposes that they temporarily acquire the soldiers from Count Serrat, and the knight remarks that they will be indebted to Conrad Castle for a few days at the very least, and that's perfectly acceptable. But our young protagonist believes it's challenging to trust the pronouncements of someone so insincere. He's oblivious to this individual's machinations, but from his perspective, it's satisfactory. As long as the Serrat family remains of service, nothing else holds significance for him. But then, Aaron inquires if some might object to departing the stronghold on account of another family. However, the knight stated negatively. He comprehends that it's not the moment to be preoccupied with superficialities. Furthermore, the brigand leader, Del Joffrey, successfully lured 20 soldiers who were absconding at that juncture, and their numbers are likely proliferating as they are conversing, so it would be prudent to augment your forces as well. And our young man simply nods in agreement and states that he's pleased by his rapid comprehension and requests, if you please, that he elaborate further on this Del Joffrey fellow. And I'd like to add that, naturally, Joffrey is undeniably a skilled swordsman. However, he also appears to be a rather haughty individual, and he presumptuously demanded a title along with 3 adjacent territories, the elite, following your downfall. However, the Duchess rebuffed his proposal, and as his relationship with the Stones deteriorated, he absconded through the gate with several soldiers, which brings us to the present predicament, where he is now a fugitive and has seized control of the southern territories adjacent to Norton Village. And our young protagonist contemplates that he employed astute tactics. Instead of seizing the gate, it's far simpler to augment one's own influence through subjugating villages beyond the walls. He would have acted similarly if he were in his position. I wish to convey that recently, women and children have endured atrocities in confinement, and Norton Village has descended into anarchy, and they could commence occupying the barricade if they aren't dealt with promptly. And Aaron affirms that this is accurate. Then he'll have to completely revise his strategy and relinquish command to Killian, which leaves Killian utterly astonished. And our young protagonist begins to explain that the soldiers have been heeding his commands all along while he was incapacitated. Therefore, they'll likely be more inclined to obey the directives of someone like him, an individual such as himself, rather than his, seeing as he hasn't yet established any rapport with them. He'll entrust him with the leadership of the knights. And what happens? He becomes absolutely elated, exclaiming that he can certainly handle that responsibility. And our group simply concurs. So, he can assume command. He mentions that Sir Brune will participate as a knight as well. And this impostor simply nods in agreement. Again, the charlatan offers a silent nod. Our protagonist then announces their departure. At dawn, he suggests they should rest now. But before Kiwi departs, he speaks. He expresses remorse for the previous incident when he assaulted Killing. Ken, overcome with emotion, insists it's unnecessary. Kneeling, he clarifies that no bones were broken, and there are no lingering issues. He expresses gratitude for his grace's concern. Aaron simply acknowledges this, and conveys his reliance on him leading the Pendragon Knights. Pendragon. The following day arrives, in the vicinity of Norton Village. Those knights turned brigands, begin to trample the deceased. With their steeds, their commander bellows for them to plunder all valuables, and to dispose of any women and children in their path. However, a mother and her daughter beseech him to at least spare the child. He merely declares that this domain is his territory, and if she doesn't comprehend the repercussions of defying the landowner's commands, Brandishing his blade, he asserts that individuals like them, who possess nothing of value, are worthless. But the woman implores him to cease. Yet he swiftly plunges his sword into her forehead, ending her life, as her distraught daughter cries out for her. And as she looks, the knight approaches her and declares his hatred for brats who won't be silent, and bids her farewell. The frantic child is at a loss for what to do, and without hesitation, the rogue knight severs the child's head. And just then, the other knight arrives behind him and states they have nothing of value to acquire there. And the corpulent man says that it's past time they seize the entire fortress. And after they capture the fortress, it will be the castle with Rand's turn. He contemplates Aaron's vulnerable expression, his mother's as well, vowing to slay that incompetent boy in front of Lady Helena. And eventually, she will be his, stating it's only a matter of time until every last Pendragon is also his, and he erupts in laughter, relishing the thought. But then, the scene shifts back to our protagonist, who is gazing upon those lands and contemplates their desolate state. And there's no way people can properly subsist like this. He inquires of Circlehin if all the areas surrounding the fortress are in this condition, and the knight confirms, saying yes, nearly 70% of the entire territory is in this state. Although there are a few villages that have managed to endure and seek assistance, leaving the fortress is not feasible, since they might encounter monsters or brigands roaming about. And our young hero ponders that accessing the mausoleum would be his foremost objective. It appears he'll need to address the development of the territories first, seeing as 70% lies in a state of dilapidation. And if they manage to restore the city to a certain degree, with a simple computation, they can sustain a populace of 10,000 individuals. But then, they begin to detect a noise emanating from above the forest. Our protagonist extends his hand, believing it's a flying beast, and commands all troops to assume their positions. And when he discerns an harpy soaring above him, he becomes utterly delighted because his first quarry of the day has arrived. And then he essentially strikes his blade. Asterisk. Note, this line is unclear. Na-pia doesn't translate well. Needs more context to improve. Assuming it means misses or hits something unimportant. Asterisk. And summons 5 archers, one with considerable strength. Step forward. He commands them to seize that Arbia alive. They commence firing upon her, and she crumples to the ground, vanquished. He then takes charge and orders them to retreat. In this manner, what he states is as anticipated. The fiends withdrew to the village, and our protagonist affirms, while he detects other monsters approaching, there are 3 miniature goblins. He swiftly dispatches them, and the knight merely reflects on his speed. Now, the 3 goblins who remain undefeated, and Bia, who is injured, gaze at him with intense fear. The knight cautions him against approaching them, for they are demons, declaring that he must now slay them, and then they'll proceed onward. But Aaron disagrees. He intends to make them his allies, which leaves everyone utterly perplexed. Thus, our young man states that goblins possess exceptional vision, and the harpy's aerial velocity is something they can also exploit. This occurred to him while pondering the desire for some serviceable kindred. But the knight interjects, saying he's never encountered anyone utilizing demons as familiars, and Aaron asserts that he has witnessed it on past battlegrounds. But he recollects that he's never been to a battlefield, unlike Aaron. So he claims he merely read it in a book, but asserts that regardless of whether they're demons or something else, he will utilize anything advantageous. If he says it's all right, then just remain still and observe. Now Aaron approaches that goblin and inquires why they are so close to the village. And the goblin explains that there are many entities in the forest that are more frightening than the Casado. From wolves to gauss, harpies and orcs, even white dragons. And their hunting grounds were pilfered by these individuals. Then Aaron states, so his name is Casado, and he replies that it's fine, and he comprehends their predicament now. And now, the next one is the harpy, and he asks how many humans she has consumed. But she claims she doesn't kill or devour humans. She only consumes sheep and serpents. And then, our girl offers her a menacing grin. And remember, these harpies relished consuming humans. But even so, he approaches and states that although the harpy, whom he encountered before, fed on humans, he will trust her this time. But he throws his sword down between the 2 monsters and declares that they will obey him from now on, and that he is the lord of this land, Dukpan Dragon. And if they disobey or attempt to flee, he will feed them to the white dragon. He leaves the 2 terrified as they begin to shriek, claiming the dragon is utterly frightening, and they will undoubtedly obey him. Then he tells the harpy Tata and the goblin Kazali that it's time to work, and he requests that they guide him to the village via the shortest route. This couple is absolutely terrified. He claims familiarity with the paths and instructs them to follow. The knight is quite astonished by Aaron's transformation of these demons into his allies. Apparently, he possesses a vivid imagination and thinks outside the box. Our young protagonist simply affirms his correctness. He believes this is something he desires for those stubborn and troublesome nobles to emulate. Now, they proceed through the village. The monsters announce their final arrival. Thanks to the couple's timely acquaintance with him, Aaron instructs the Cirquilha to remain there and await his commands. He and Sir Brando will infiltrate the monastery with a small contingent of soldiers. He will dispatch a runner to them later to join afterward. Kira affirms with a yes, and so they journey onward, and the young woman contemplates that although his lordship is overseeing the operation, he's never witnessed the battlefield firsthand. She wonders if all will be well, as the knight declares that now she will be under his charge and safeguard, and must remain by his side at all times. Then Aaron commands the group to advance and seize the territory, and this young man also requests aerial reconnaissance from Casario Tata. The two behemoths depart, proceeding with their reconnaissance mission. The scene shifts to the entrance of the monastery, and the knight continues to escort the children and their mothers as captives. The child's mother pleads, so he wouldn't harm his son, but that corpulent knight, that scoundrel, orders her to be silent and tells her to be grateful she's still breathing. And the child continues weeping, calling for his mother, which infuriates the knight. And as he's about to strike the child, his mother begs him to stop, but then he realizes his arm has been severed and he's terrified. He turns around, and Aaron Pendragon is standing behind him, glaring at him with an icy stare. He wonders, is this Aaron Pendragon? He's completely bewildered by the situation. The woman is overjoyed. Your Grace, you're here. And finally, our hero has found this village, the absolute dregs of society. And so the two lock eyes, and that rogue knight realizes he's surrounded by Pendragon and his chivalry. He wonders why he should even bother with the feudal Pendragon standing there. But just then, our protagonist draws his blade and grazes it against his cheek, drawing blood. With utmost authority, he demands to know who gave him permission to open his filthy mouth. The man instantly trembles in fear and starts shouting, ordering everyone to kill the boy. And so, they all charge towards Pendragon. Our group is there, unsheathing their swords. With another blade in hand, he appears utterly enraged, and as the scabbard clatters to the ground, he simply lunges towards them all, decapitating everyone. This leaves the portly knight utterly astonished, wondering what is transpiring, and if this is truly the Pendragon he knows. But the moment our protagonist finishes, that wretched, someone halts his blade. This leaves Aaron completely bewildered. Even his former fiancée is baffled by the unfolding events, because essentially it's Sir Brandon declaring he's just lending a hand to the esteemed leader of the brigands he possesses. The rogue knight inquires, "Who in the blazes are you?" And immediately, Aaron recoils a step. This man declares himself to be Joseph Brandon, the commander of the Crimson Knight forces of Count Sayrid's house. And he, with that condescending smirk, declares that seeing as he desires to eliminate this brat, he'll lend him assistance. However, the young lady inquires of her knight what this implies, but Aaron dismisses her, and Breno fails to inform his mistress to please not be deceived by this incompetent fool, who lacks everything required to become a count, and that he is more suitable for her than this piece of filth. And the portly man remarks, "So this is serious then?" A true confrontation between the two, and he essentially seizes the blade of those deceased individuals on the ground, and proclaims he'll accept this knight's proposition, and immediately lunges towards Pendragon, both with their swords drawn, vowing to make him regret underestimating them. And so, the young woman implores him to be cautious. But our protagonist merely observes them with deep suspicion. Like his blade, he safeguards both women simultaneously and repels the assailants. He declares he won't issue another warning. A dwarf warrior should remain behind the front lines. She becomes visibly agitated, unsure of how to respond, but he assures her he will handle the knight. Immediately, he states that he will entrust her to his protection. And so, the goblin suggests that the human princess should retreat to safety, while she contemplates that Sir Brandon's strength is renowned, even amongst knights. Not to mention, there's also the brigand leader. She wonders if young Master Aaron, he'll be fine on his own, but when she glances back, she perceives his unwavering resolve. and she instantly flushes crimson. She acquiesces and departs, and this one instructs Tada to execute his morning directive and procure Circilla, and that Harpy declares she's leaving immediately. Meanwhile, those two scoundrels assert it's too late to summon reinforcements, and that he will be deceased long before reinforcements arrive. But he, facing them, simply states that they surely know how to tell a joke, so how about they try? He will be their adversary, and they can both attack him simultaneously. And with that, Brandon charges towards him. With all that, tell him not to assume he can maintain that stoic expression indefinitely, and regardless of how much his demeanor has transformed, it doesn't alter the reality that he lacks battlefield expertise, and that he possesses significantly more experience than this lad. And this seasoned warrior was evading Brandon's assaults and simply steps on his blade, pondering, how's that for experience? And snaps it in two, leaving him utterly bewildered. But right behind him is our protagonist, and he lands a punch square in his face, knocking them both down, sending him flying. And now he directs his blade towards them. He speaks of combat expertise, inquiring if he was referring to battlefield experience, and he won't land a single strike with such rudimentary swordsmanship. And the protagonist states he's read, assisted at the castle, and plunges his blade directly into the man's only Breno raises his arm in an attempt to defend himself, and Aaron declares he'll repay his gratitude. He implores him to accept it, and essentially, he severs the knight's arm. And upon witnessing his severed arm, he erupts and screams. With Aaron stepping on him, he merely questions why he's lying there, and if his duty isn't to escort Lady Ciros. And he wears a look of utter fury as he swiftly rises, vowing never to step foot on his land again. He simply flees, weeping uncontrollably. And now, Aaron declares that one is down. This portly fellow is next, with his severing blade before our protagonist. One can only wonder if he's made a pact with the devil. But he states that a multitude of his comrades remain in this domain, and he couldn't possibly intend to slaughter them all single-handedly. But Ari inquires if he's forgotten that House Pendragon boasts numerous exceptional soldiers, and these reinforcements are imminent. He proclaims his task is complete, with virtually every knight pursuing him. He asserts that his soldiers will eradicate any remaining pests, and he, with that haughty gaze, declares, "The scum who betrayed Pendragon, don't you dare presume for a moment you'll have an easy demise." And that accursed knight immediately succumbs to despair, and thus, essentially, he's subjected to being trampled by those knights. And after some time, they can find that individual within the monastery, crucified, missing a limb, and their numerous enslaved people are slaughtered for amusement. And our protagonist glances back and observes that they were imprisoned and likely subjected to narcotics. And when he gazes in the other direction, there's a chamber filled with numerous corpses, which leaves him quite disturbed. And so, that individual who isn't yet deceased, Aaron plunges his blade into the man's abdomen and states he hasn't observed a single villager outside since his arrival. He inquires if the man slaughtered them all. However, the man begins to profusely apologize and beg forgiveness for his actions. But Aaron retorts, "Forgive you? How preposterous. It seems entirely fitting that someone like you, who acted with such impunity in this territory, should plead for his life." The corpulent man anxiously asks if Aaron intends to kill him, but Aaron declares he won't be the one to end his life. In fact, the decision doesn't rest with him at all. The man wonders aloud what Aaron is implying. Aaron strides towards the assembled villagers and commands their attention. He declares that this man's fate now lies in their hands, the villagers who have endured such suffering. This pronouncement fills the man with absolute terror, and so he instructs them to cook him, burn him, do as they please with him. He then sheathes his blade and departs. They commence conferring amongst themselves, and subsequently concur on their course of action. They become utterly enraged, and instantly advance upon the man. He trembles with terror, and desperately implores them to cease and desist. But they begin to pelt him with stones, stab him, and inflict every imaginable torment upon the wretch. After this, he finally expires. A pool of his own lifeblood spills forth. Now, in another moment, our young protagonist is traversing the monastery, and so he unlatches a door and proceeds to a chamber containing a statue. However, concealed behind the effigy, there's a man wielding a blade, and in this instant he lunges at Aaron. But Aaron, possessing superior speed, doesn't even need to unsheath his weapon. He defends himself, flinging the attacker to the ground, and then pins him down with his blade precisely, directly upon his neck. Blood splatters against the statue, and he gazes at it, uttering the name Leona, the goddess of light. He inquires if she will condemn him for spilling blood in her presence, without a flicker of hesitation, and so he declares that although he has been reborn in this form, granted a second chance at life, he refuses to live as a charlatan. He will treat individuals with the respect they deserve, and will inflict upon the cruel the punishment they warrant. And that is the essence of his character. You then remove the necklace he was wearing, and present it to the saint. Declare that this is the path he has chosen, and if she intends to condemn him, to do so after he accomplishes his objective. And with that, he departs. The scene shifts to the northern village, where everyone expresses gratitude to Eren. A woman with her child professes her deep thankfulness to Eren. Eren replies that she should feel free to reach out to them if she requires any assistance with rebuilding. She responds, "May God bless your journey, your grace." Everyone rejoices, wishing Swindragon a long life. He turns and takes his leave. Meanwhile, Kazali inquires if he performed admirably, and if he's eligible for a commendation. Tada chimes in, stating he also toiled relentlessly. Eren affirms his agreement. He'll bestow upon them a fitting recompense, and requests they remain at the encampment. This elates the pair considerably. Meanwhile, the night approaches, remarking that it appears Norton Village is thriving, for the time being, and after all is said and done, they will finally breach Anchor Forest. However, Eren interjects, stating that's not quite right. There's still a matter he must attend to beforehand. The scene now shifts to a few days prior, at Conrad Castle. Within Eren's office, he was conversing with the aforementioned lady, and inquiring if what she's claiming is that they could leverage the orcs of the Ancona Forest to their advantage, and she affirmed they cannot forsake the Ancona Forest, as they've sworn an oath to remain within their domain, and their combat prowess is vastly superior to ordinary orcs. And if he could subdue them, it would be a significant boon. But he countered that orcs care for nothing but battle and slaughter, and if she truly believed they would aid them in achieving their ambitions. But she retorted that it all hinged on him, and she surmised he already knew about the orcs, but they invariably follow the strong. And for them, the pinnacle of strength is dragons. But he couldn't borrow the Souldrake's power to sway them. Since Eren was deemed unworthy by the Souldrake, he would have no recourse but to fight and conquer them, for them to follow him. And so, he speaks of the orcs and contemplates this, but she states that this is to be anticipated from someone entitled the God of Death, of the battlegrounds, and she inquires if he has engaged orcs in combat before. He recollects and affirms that he has. When he was still Raven Vareth, he battled a colossally powerful orc, but ultimately, despite the arduous struggle, he severed its head, and he declares that he fought one when he had just joined the demonic forces, and he triumphed, but it was exceedingly challenging. However, if he were to engage an orc in combat now, he would likely prevail, and she remarks that this is excellent, so he'll succeed, and she becomes utterly delighted, explaining that after vanquishing the Ongno orcs, they can effortlessly reach the mausoleum. He contemplates that she makes it sound remarkably simple. The scene now shifts back to them, journeying towards the orcs' location. Meanwhile, he inquires of her if they truly intend to transform the orcs into their allies. He expresses his strong reluctance to accept this. Eren states that clearing the Ancona Forest will be arduous, with so few in their ranks. To minimize casualties, they require formidable warriors. He counters with, but if they engage in combat with the orcs, they're likely to be obliterated. But then, a couple and Tada concur, claiming that's precisely the situation, and that provoking orcs is suicidal. Tada expresses his unwillingness to die. However, Eren voices his disdain for this defeatist mindset. He urges them to devise a strategy for victory. Otherwise, he threatens to offer them as dragon fodder. Suddenly, Eren overhears a nearby dispute. He recognizes the voice as belonging to Bran. Eren wonders if he hasn't truly returned yet. The couple expresses grave concern. What is it? Eren inquires. Those are the Ancona orcs, they reveal. This revelation unsettles Eren. A deeply worried Ken immediately advances towards them. The scene then shifts to Sir Brandon and Princess Sayward, being encircled by the orcs, who have them surrounded. Meanwhile, Brandon, terrified, implores them to cease. He already warned them to maintain their distance, and Sarod remarks, "Just as I suspect, nothing beneficial arises from associating with him." She recollects encountering him, missing a limb, and inquired about the reason for his actions, gesturing her blade towards Duke Pendragon. It's akin to waging war against the Empire itself. If he genuinely desires to rebel, then he can forsake his home. But he becomes intensely agitated by this and desperately pleads that she not excommunicate. He emphasizes that he's still obligated to escort her to the Cyril territory, and she affirms, "Indeed, your sole duty was to safeguard me, and now is the time for you to comprehend your rightful place. Upon our return, your father shall determine your punishment." He becomes utterly infuriated contemplating this. She departs, declaring their involvement concluded, and expresses her desire to retire and rest. The scene shifts to the orcs confronting them. The orc addresses the human, pointing out that his sword is directed at them. He inquires if the human desires death. Meanwhile, Brandeo, paralyzed by fear, is uncertain what to do. But then, our protagonist arrives and questions their actions. Both look up, bewildered by Aaron's presence. Sard blushes deeply, gazing at him. Realizing Duke Aaron has arrived, Breno rushes towards Aaron and pleads for salvation. Consider how someone like him became a knight, and this Emir squire addresses your grace, warning of the peril of going there alone. But then the orcs realize they are the Pendragons. Therefore, that boy can only be Aaron Pendragon. He expresses his strong desire to meet him, which makes Aaron quite suspicious. And then our young hero notices that the orc activates an ability to terrify everyone. This leaves everyone apprehensive due to that aura. And what he further observes is that the ability is fueled by the fear that half of the orcs, he can't even move or breathe properly. And he says it's just as they imagined. They're incredibly dangerous, and it's time to retreat. But Aaron dismounts his horse, while everyone is astonished by his actions. And so, he approaches them and asks everyone to stay put and not to draw their weapons. And now Aaron, facing the orc, declares that he alone is sufficient to finish off this green-skinned creature. This declaration makes the orcs strangely delighted, because now a true battle will finally commence. Then, they lock eyes, each with a serious gaze. Aaron inquires, "Are you the anchor orcs?" The orc approaches, confirming, "Indeed, we are." Aaron observes him intently and senses the orc's attempt to display his dominance over him. Suddenly, the orc delivers a powerful headbutt to Aaron's face. The unexpected attack astonishes everyone present, including the orcs in the rear. Meanwhile, Killian contemplates the gravity of the situation, recognizing that the orc initiated the assault. After the orc collapses, his fellow orcs erupt in laughter at his expense, mocking him for suffering a nosebleed simply from being struck by a human, leaving everyone utterly bewildered. And that colossal orc calls him a wretch and demands to know what a Pendragon is doing there. But Aaron retorts, asking why the orc himself is present. According to the pact, according to the covenant that they forged with the Pendragons, they should be forbidden from exiting the forest. Yet, they have emerged. The orc declares it's all Aaron's fault. He was the one forsaken by the guardian deity of the woods, and the orcs, refuse to obey a weakling. And that's why, even though they must heed the guardian, the forest deity, they won't heed someone who has lost equal standing with the guardian deity, because he was unsuccessful in forging a pact with her. And he surmises that this entity, guardian of the forest, to whom he's referring, must be the Sodrake, NAR, who states that this is the reason they departed the woods, to demonstrate bloodshed freely unleashed as they seize control of the territory. And Aaron declares his understanding. They are consumed by a thirst for blood. However, unfortunately, he desires their power, and he draws closer, asserting that they would not comply with his commands. And for this reason, he undertook the journey there. And if he comprehends why, he relinquished his weapons. And AR, who becomes quite intrigued by Aaron, remarks that although he is merely a human, it seems he's familiar with Orcish customs. And he also releases his weapon. Aaron declares he understands perfectly. As long as his adversary doesn't wield a weapon, neither should he. He must accept any challenge to a duel. This greatly excites the orc. Aaron, too, becomes enthusiastic and proclaims they should fight. Abiding by these rules, the orc exclaims, "Very well." They both charge toward each other. Initially, Aaron evades the orc's first strike, but he thinks to himself, it appears to be true that they possess superior combat prowess compared to other orcs. If it were an ordinary person, their bones would have undoubtedly been crushed. As Aaron is airborne, the orc readies a blow, and Aaron retaliates with a swift kick. The impact generates a powerful gust of wind, astonishing everyone present. Glancing at his foot, Aaron notices a fractured piece of his armor and acknowledges the orc's formidable strength. However, this orc isn't as agile as the one he previously encountered. Therefore, he deduces that the orc hasn't utilized his full potential. The orc confirms the obviousness of this observation, stating that humans would instantly perish if he unleashed his full power. Already plotting his next assault on Aaron, he explains that this is precisely why he reserves his full strength solely for adversaries capable of withstanding his blows. Aaron declares it's time to face him head-on with all his might, and Walker winds up for a massive blow, a colossal punch aimed directly at him. He declares that he already knows this, assumed he wouldn't withstand a single strike. But apparently, he's a rather intriguing human, and with that, he launches a fist towards Aaron. But he evades it, yet his cheek is grazed, and he realizes he's become quicker. He takes a step back, or charges towards him, demanding if he doesn't want to fight him. He commands him not to dare die now, and with a mighty blow, he connects with Aaron. But the protagonist manages to defend himself, while his former fiancée fears for his life, and the knight revels in his suffering. Killian recognizes that this is a catastrophe, and Tada and the couple, they're trembling with fear, and this Hungarian bellows his name. And now, after that massive impact, everyone is bewildered, unable to comprehend what's happened. And where is Aaron? But the orc is pondering that his fist definitively connected, but he has a very peculiar sensation. Yet, as Aaron extends that smoke, he utters, "What the hell?" His body has become entirely corroded, because he's only been battling weaklings lately, and he's truly contorted, damaged. Even his forehead is bleeding. Sandy becomes deeply concerned for Aaron, while the oxen rejoice at the fight, and Kine grows deeply concerned for him, but finds himself incredulous that he's still standing after enduring a full-force blow from an orc. But he's never encountered tales of a human prevailing against an orc in hand-to-hand combat, and his grace is the cherished heir to the duchy, and safeguarding his life is his utmost priority. Thus, he commands his men to protect him. But Aaron orders them all to hold back, to remain there, declaring that this battle is solely between him and the orc. He requires no protection from them. Christian appears quite disturbed, but then states that he understands. And so, the aged orc approaches and remarks that this is quite magnificent, to think he would remain alive after confronting Karta, the most formidable orc of the Anchor Forest. And he informs the other orcs who are observing it's quite fascinating, and this Welling states that this will serve as excellent rehabilitation to restore his former senses. And now he declares it's time to go all out, while the orc asserts that he's the first human to survive after taking his punch head-on, but it's only a matter of time until he succumbs to his injuries. Then Aaron gazes at him and inquires if he's serious, and if he isn't underestimating him too much just because of something this trivial. And so, he begins to utilize his regeneration ability and claims it was just a scratch, and simply the cut that he has on his forehead closes, something that leaves him utterly astonished. Noticing the wound vanish, he remarks that the pendant is truly quite intriguing, and that now he has his full attention, and he immediately lunges at him to deliver another blow, which shatters the entire floor. But Eric manages to evade it, thinking that to vanquish him, he needs to unleash his full potential on his vital points in his back. He contemplates that to achieve this, he must first restrict his movements. The thought process of orcs is as straightforward as it seems. Furthermore, with his regenerative abilities, it will be effortless. And so, the orc charges towards him again, and he's genuinely thrilled by this battle, and questions where Aaron's previous audacity has gone. And why are you only dodging now? While our enraged protagonist declares him a tiresome orc, and inquires if all anchor orcs are only capable of brandishing their fists. This infuriates the orc, who demands if he's truly mocking them, and prepares to strike Aaron. He vows to make him regret his words. But as he's about to land a kick on Aaron, our hero beams, realizing his plan has worked perfectly. He successfully blocks the kick with his arms, but he's still hit, having lowered his guard, causing Killing to yell his name. But the orc sneers that his arms are now useless, and that this is the end of the Pendragon. But Aaron offers him a sly grin. Her words finally caught him, and she essentially grabs his leg and compliments his well-defined arms. But this is the end for the Ancona orc. That behemoth was certain that he had shattered his bones. He wonders how he's still capable of movement, but realizes he fell perfectly. It was his plan all along, and our girl swiftly pulls him up and then leaps towards him. This makes the orc think this is very bad, and he won't be able to evade this attack. Meanwhile, Aaron, enraged from the beating, delivers a powerful kick to his face. The orc loses several teeth, and after Aaron lands, the orc collapses, seemingly defeated. This leaves everyone astonished, including Serge, who finds herself increasingly smitten with our protagonist. And then the elder orc becomes utterly exhilarated by this combat, while the others are quite pleased, because that was incredibly impressive. And they commence to tease that Carta, saying he was vanquished by a mere human, and that this Aaron possesses immense power. And following that battle, she dismounts her steed and requests that her comrades tend to Aaron's wounds. But Aaron states that he is perfectly fine and not in significant pain. Meanwhile, she inquires how he can possibly claim that, causing Aaron to scoff and contemplate that the agony of regeneration is far worse than the injury itself, and he should be grateful for this power being bestowed upon him. And he observes his hand trembling momentarily, but after the regeneration, he's completely fine. He then approaches the anchor orc and states that he heard his name was Carta. With a protagonist's aura surrounding him, he simply demands obedience, and that this is a command, an air of knowing he's the victor, and that the loser must follow the winner. So, Carta complies with his request. Still, Aaron declares that from now on, they will commence preparations to conquer the Ancona forest, and that Carta must assist him in this endeavor. First, he leaves the orc bewildered. Forest, he questions, and why? He was previously rejected by the forest guardian deity. Yet, Aaron declares he will open the mausoleum, which greatly astonishes all the orcs. One inquires if he intends to forge a pact with the forest guardian deity. Aaron confirms that is precisely his plan, and instructs them to proceed to Soldrick. He promises a horde of monsters so immense that they will grow weary of battling. He then asks if they aren't grateful for this opportunity, asserting that from now on, they will have the chance to fight every day. This greatly excites the orcs. However, an orc remarks that they shouldn't get too enthusiastic, as these monsters are hardly worthy adversaries for them. He boasts they will reach the mausoleum swiftly. Aaron responds that if that's the case, then they can take it easy. In one of those nights, he presents the sword to Aaron, and after the orc beholds the blade, he genuflects, and the others follow his lead, kneeling as well. And so, the boy declares that these Ancona orcs must pledge their allegiance to the Pendragons. He expects them to give their utmost, and that orc is quite pleased with this. Meanwhile, Sar becomes quite flushed, gazing at our protagonist. However, Brenda becomes enraged and envious witnessing this. And now, night is falling. They stand upon a bridge, and Aaron bids them farewell. He will leave some soldiers behind to escort her back to the house's territory. Serut, they may return to their domain now, and she says that she truly has no excuses. Aaron gazes at Brandon and states that the next time he raises his blade against him, it won't end with just a lost arm. Leaves that knight trembling in fear. Even the orc stares at him, utterly enraged, which makes him soil himself once more. And so, Aaron beckons, and so Aaron summons the orc to accompany him. But after they depart, Seer deeply regrets her actions for breaking off her betrothal to this man, and finds herself increasingly enamored with him. And with him leading the way, she believes that if it's him, he will undoubtedly succeed in opening the mausoleum. He stands at the forefront with the protagonist's aura surrounding him, and that girl, observing this, blushes even deeper, while Brando becomes utterly furious, consumed by jealousy. And after that, night fell into the fortune teller. Then she proclaims that they have finally arrived at the Ancona forest, and everyone becomes somewhat apprehensive regarding the Ancona forest. Meanwhile, Aaron declares that everything commences here, and they can finally initiate the battle that he vowed to wage. And now, it transitions to Sodrake, gazing at the moon and stating that he has arrived. He asserts that since he is present, he must endeavor to locate the entrance to his domain. He, the individual who lacks the soul of a Pendragon. And now, the following day in the valley of the Ancona forest, everyone is hunting numerous monsters, and the orcs are immensely pleased to be hunting monsters as well. But they say that slaying these serpents, they're not even good for target practice. And Carta says he's fed up with facing so many weaklings. While the knights are toiling away, battling those monsters, our hero arrives to slice one of those flying serpents in half. Rescuing that knight, and he expresses gratitude for Aaron's assistance. Aaron replies that it's no trouble and calls for Krata, the orc mage. He entrusts the care of the wounded to him, and Krata acknowledges this. Aaron urges him not to worry, as he has brought potent remedies. There's no need to fret. He can handle it. But just then, Ken approaches and inquires if his grace is injured. Aaron confirms everything is all right and inquires about the status of the remaining troops. Pao reports there aren't many beasts upstream, and they can proceed with their advance. However, they'll be short on stamina if they engage in a confrontation with demons. Aaron then glances back and addresses Carta, inquiring about the remaining distance to reach Lord Soldrake's domain. Carta admits uncertainty about the exact distance, but assures him they'll spot indicators at the quarry. If they continue a bit further in that direction, the only certainty he can offer is the existence of a cavern connecting the guardian entity's realm to this location. Aaron questions if there are any potential hazards to be aware of en route to the quarry, but the orc states they don't have. The area that's still Orcish territory, and those wretched serpents were only searching for water. Aaron declares that's good. So, they'll proceed to the quarry, and then establish a camp there, and seek out the cavern at daybreak. If they encounter any skirmishes along the way, the orcs can handle it, and now they'll depart immediately. Bo, Killian, and the orc regard him with utmost confidence. They affirm their understanding and will now follow Aaron. Night has fallen once again, and Aaron gazes at the sky, contemplating the moon. They halt to set up camp, but he muses that this place is quite ominous, just for a quarry. But then, he inquires of Carta, because the quarry is sealed off. But the missive states that the specifics remain unclear. However, according to their elder, goblins used to excavate there. Nevertheless, there were whispers regarding the vanishing of all the goblins, all at once at some point, never to resurface. And Aaron observes the couple, but the pair claims they don't inhabit the forest, so they are unaware. Furthermore, he's never heard tell of goblins personally mining. He's much more adept at pilfering than laboring, which astonishes everyone, because he's genuinely quite candid. And so, what? He approaches and inquires of your grace. What's the issue? But Aaron advised against leaving this zone until sunrise, until the sun ascends, and the orcs can maintain surveillance in pairs. He then requests that they erect tents and allows the soldiers respite. He expresses his apologies to the fellow, but he will share the watch with him, and Carta simply states it's not a problem. Thus, they finally establish camp, and already 2 orcs are slumbering, and those creatures as well. In the heart of the encampment, only a lone soldier stands guard, but he detects a sound and investigates the disturbance, questioning the source of the noise. But when he realizes it, he's struck by a scythe across his chest. Just as he was about to alert the others, he collapses lifeless. The scene now shifts to Aaron's tent, where he finds sleep elusive. He senses something amiss, and wonders why the goblins have vanished simultaneously. But he reasons that they couldn't have simply disappeared, but rather someone made them disappear. He questions who on earth would do such a thing. But he doesn't wait long before a cloaked figure appears at the foot of the mountain, and it's a skeletal being. With its staff, it unleashes its power, and numerous skeletons begin to emerge from the earth. They quickly encircle the entire encampment. Along with those numerous skulls, other creatures awaken and are already surrounding the entire camp. And at this very instant, our protagonist senses their presence and swiftly draws his twin blades. Emerging from the tent to confront these behemoths, he suddenly spots a colossal, 2-headed demon charging towards him. He instantly engages the creature, attacking with full force, and wonders about their origin. He remarks, it's no surprise that those goblins have vanished, given they're all deceased. In this manner, he lands a precise blow upon the monster's head. The impact jolts everyone awake, including Tada, who is instantly terrified. The orcs rush to investigate the commotion, inquiring about the nature of the disturbance. Everyone then witnesses Eric, engaged in combat with a gigantic demon. He plunges his blade directly into the demon's eye. Yet, the beast remains undefeated. However, in this moment, Eddie slashes a deep gash across its mouth, decapitating the monstrous creature. And now, Killian and Carta are at its rear. They inquire about the predicament. He realizes these are the goblins who toiled in the mines. The man questions how they all perished. Aaron explains it was a light. Lights are beings capable of utilizing the deceased as servants. Thus, it likely slaughtered them all. It seems it intends to obstruct from pledging allegiance to the dragon and unsealing the mausoleum. He declares that, as they can observe, they are already encircled. Therefore, they have no recourse but to confront them, for they will not vanish until they locate the juror, and he declares he will discover the whereabouts of the genuine remains and address the situation. Meanwhile, they must procure him some time, and thus everyone engages in combat, and the orcs swiftly vanquish numerous skeletal goblins, while he discerns that they are vastly outnumbered, and someone is endeavoring to obstruct them from reinstating the former glory of House Pendragon. However, he will not permit them to succeed, believing that his grace has sufficiently transformed, and it's as if he has become an entirely distinct individual. He is mistaken, you see. He merely believes that perhaps he can attain what his predecessors failed to accomplish. Furthermore, the current young master surpasses the former, and if it is him, he will undoubtedly subdue the white dragon and unlock the mausoleum, restoring past glories and enabling the well-dragon house to flourish once more. He declares their era of decline is over. The Spendragon will undoubtedly rise again. They are the proud white dragon knights. He swiftly decapitates that demon, but then goblins assail the protagonist while he battles colossal serpents, and they already launch a volley of spears hurtled towards him. Aaron surmised that their objective was his life. That's why he no longer had time to locate light. With a swift shift of his blade, he positioned the serpent before him. The three projectiles found their mark, squarely striking the creature. He pondered the mastermind behind this ambush, but the downfall of the Pendragon family and the severance of House Varge were undoubtedly interconnected. They must desire something from them, he deduced. Given their attempts to obstruct them, a surge of exhilaration coursed through him. All right, he declared, I will assist you. He resolved to restore the house's authority, even against their wishes. Feel free to try and stop me at any time. And then, he's instantly engaging in combat once more against that colossal serpent and promptly cleaves it in two. He solely contemplates reclaiming the honor of House Ver. With his bare hands, he proceeds directly to the battlefield and only considers that they've already confronted numerous foes. Although they are mere skeletal goblins, they won't be capable of handling them all, since there are so many. But when he's momentarily diverted, a gigantic scythe swiftly appears, aimed at his neck, and thus he begins to explain that a leech is a sorcerer who bound his own weapon to achieve immortality, because they transgress the laws of nature, and even the Empire itself, although lenient towards magic and sorcery, punishes them severely, and they are willing to resort to any measures to accomplish their ambitions. For this very reason, the Empire typically commands the demonic legion to handle them, since the Empire is indifferent to whether its soldiers survive or perish. Consequently, there are numerous casualties, and the primary source of these losses are the lights. And he already possesses a memory of when he was engaged in combat against one, and behind him that scythe was already present, finishing off one of his comrades, and his head simply detonates. And when he glances back, he is unaware of what just terminated him. And then he gazes at the light and only notices that he hasn't twitched a muscle, unaware of what transpired and if it was sorcery. And then the other fellow begins to flee, proclaiming that specters exist and he refuses to perish. Yet, light merely lifts a single digit, making a gesture, and as the man voices his unwillingness to die, he's struck from behind by that scythe wielded by the phantom, and his head violently explodes. Raven believed they only dwelled in folklore, but those chills, they are truly present. Light's most formidable servants, capable of remaining concealed, the apparition unseen by mortals, as it is a spirit, much like the Grim Reaper. And when he glances behind him, a scythe is already aimed at his neck, realizes that if that blade strikes him, he will meet his demise. And now, as it stood, he could detect the aura of that scythe. And at the final moment, he managed to parry the blow, and a brilliant radiance emanated from his blade. He couldn't comprehend what had just transpired. What is this sort? But he heard numerous voices urging composure, and the child spoke, Your Grace, and soldiers were collapsing without warning. He was baffled by the unfolding events. Then he noticed that enormous scythe was descending towards Killian's back. He instantly seized Killian's arm and yanked him away, rescuing him from certain death. And he questioned, what in the world just happened? While his only thought was, this is a disaster. The specters share a common presence. Thus, those who have never encountered them before, they won't comprehend. They'll be slain before they even realize it. These specters won't vanish, unless dealt with using the light. And the direst part is there isn't just one, and if it escapes from there, every soldier will perish, powerless to do anything, and he just gazes at all the wounded, but he contemplates that if he can't handle the light now, they'll be overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. And Tada and the couple, he possesses exceptional night vision, but they cannot search for the light this way, because they are petrified, and so he ponders that this isn't the demonic corporation, so he cannot simply abandon them. He must devise a solution. But then, the orc mage activates his power, and a brilliant emerald light begins to envelop the entire area. He places a hand on Aaron's shoulder and declares that it's now his turn. Aaron gazes at him as the mage proclaims that he's in trouble, and he will lend him his strength. And now, he can behold the power bestowed by the great earth god. And so, numerous roots begin to spread throughout the entire location. And in an instant, those roots ensnare the monsters and then crush them. A massive tree surges upward amidst everyone. Aaron simply states that he's a fool. If he possessed magic, he should have used it earlier. But the orc retorts that's nonsense. A potent incantation requiring extensive preparation. Unfortunately, this isn't the conclusion. He explains that this spell cannot be utilized repeatedly. This will be his sole opportunity. He must locate Leech while the enchantment remains active. Aaron scans his surroundings, searching for Light's presence. He gazes intently in all directions, then glances behind him. Finally, he spots him at the mountain's base. After Aaron confirms the sighting, the mage states that somehow he will manage the remaining skeletons. He urges Aaron onward. Aaron sprints towards him. Meanwhile, Cart is vanquishing numerous skeletons. But Aaron, on his back, only cries out his name and indicates that Zeke is positioned above. Thus, Carter comprehends his intentions and urges him to act swiftly. He braces himself with an outstretched hand, and Aaron leaps upon him. In this manner, the man propels him upwards towards Zeke's location. Wielding his dual blades, he lunges to strike Zeke. But with his hardened defense, he successfully parries both blades. Aaron questions if he doesn't value his life. Now that he stands directly before him, he reflects that certain spirits have also ascended to this higher plane. Consequently, only the skeletal remains on the ground remain. As his forces will soon reach their breaking point, he must swiftly conclude this battle. Zeke, enraged, immediately activates his magic, and several colossal skeletal hands erupt from the earth, but Aaron shatters them with ease. And just as he's about to strike, immense forces emerge to pummel him, but he manages a last-minute dodge. Realizing this is a trap, the specters are safeguarding Leyte. He retreats, declaring, "It's too perilous. I can't get close this way." But just then, Leyte unleashes another incantation, a blaze of fire. This gigantic fireball hurtles towards Aaron, but he evades it. Confused and disoriented, he notices Leyte has sealed his escape route with flames, and the phantoms close in. This Leyte is far more cunning than he anticipated, and so he's encircled by those specters and the leech who are already setting their sights on his heart. But the badges he was wearing begin to shimmer, and numerous azure flames start to emanate from his body. This wight becomes apprehensive about that power, and those flames, cerulean flames, begin to envelop Aaron's entire form. And that azure flame inquires as to his identity and states that they possess a kindred spirit. However, it will await him. Therefore, he must reveal himself to it when the time comes. Ultimately, this enigmatic soul, the one communicating with him, was the dragon. Aaron recognizes its voice and utters its name, Audra, and he begins radiating all that power because of the sword. And when he opens his eyes, around them are what seem to be dragon wings. And the power of the Sudra, which is bound to him, leaves White deeply concerned. And then he realizes he can now perceive the specters. These are truly grotesque beings. He remarks that it's the first time he's witnessed one, and the phantoms are advancing towards him. But he activates the aura of his blade, and with eyes blazing, wings unfurling, he immediately assaults the apparitions. And effortlessly, with the inferno of his sword, he vanquishes them. He deems it child's play, and then proceeds to engage the elite. Now, the elite has nowhere to escape, and so the protagonist, with his sword, embeds it squarely in the elite's forehead. He declares that it's finally over. Then he observes the elite, consumed by the sword's flames. And with this, he witnesses the body disintegrate, and then his staff is also destroyed. And all those skeletal goblins collapse to the ground. And this one card declares that the skeletons have ceased their movement. And the orc mage proclaims that the Lord is dealt with the light. And with that, even the corpses of the goblins begin to disintegrate, and the mage states that this is because they have been bereft of their leader and have been reduced to mist. Meanwhile, atop the mountain stands our protagonist, gazing at the heavens and observing that all those souls are illuminating the clouds. And after he descends, he realizes they have suffered the loss of several knights, and his companions are lamenting the casualties, while he is weeping profusely. But Eren doesn't shed a tear, for he is a stoic lad. And following this, they inter the deceased, and subsequently return to camp to repose. Within his tent, the protagonist was cleansing his blade, but he succumbs to slumber. He commences experiencing a recollection of receiving a missive, and discerns that these are the memories of that particular day, when he obtained this correspondence from someone, and afterward he was already being incriminated. But he professed his innocence. This is erroneous, and that it was merely a misunderstanding, a fabricated scenario. But subsequently, he is apprehended. He only expresses remorse for his father, his mother, and his sibling, but he contemplates that he must cease these reminiscences. Yet he persists in recalling when he was encircled by numerous nobles, gazing upon him, and the severed heads of his family members were positioned before him, and he was there, weeping, still embodying rave. And now a recollection of Eren emerges. He implored his father not to perish, vowing to become a dragon knight, and that he would be a valiant one, a truly exceptional dragon knight. So he begged him to live, and after these memories surface, memories that are intrinsically linked, he awakens in a frenzy, drenched in a cold sweat. But then he becomes enraged and storms out of the tent, unable to slumber. And so the orc inquires if he's still awake, because it's quite late. But Eren tells Kratta that after all that has transpired, he's still keeping watch and that Kratta can rest as well. But the mage remarked that orcs possess immense strength. He'll be all right. Furthermore, there would only be further casualties if he entrusted this to the humans. And so, our young protagonist gazes upon the interred individuals, and Kratos declares it was a grueling battle. And Eren stated that this very blade rescued him, and the mage merely observed it, while Eren proclaimed that this sword, the highly esteemed Widow's Lament blade, bestowed the power to shield against the specter's scythe. And it was the flames of Sudra that the orc inquired if he was referring to the guardian deity of the forest. And Eren affirmed that this sword possesses the power of Saudra, which can perceive through all things, recalling the moment he unsealed his eyes with that power of Saudra, which bonded with him. And he caught a glimpse of the specters, while pondering that the white dragon is aware he's not Eren, but rather Raven. Yet, a memory of Eren surfaced, now intertwined with his own recollections. He questions why he dreamt of Eren, and a throbbing pain begins in his head. The mage inquires what's wrong, but Eren only glares at him, seething with rage. As the mage probes, why such fury? Eren simply dismisses it as nothing. He's pressed on his sullen mood, confessing his sleeplessness. The mage then suggests rest, but Eren remains silent. Finally, he admits to a nightmare, and the mage, sensing his reluctance to elaborate, simply acknowledges his understanding. And now, dawn is broken, and everyone is poised to depart. As they gaze into the forest depths, Karta voices a foreboding premonition. The mage concurs with his assessment, and states that observing this scene, their odds of safe return have diminished considerably. And as they behold what lies before them, a profoundly shadowy place, enveloped by a sinister aura. And so, Clean declares that the senses of monsters are already far more acute than those of humans. And if he perceives something there, it signifies its presence. Then Eren exclaims it can only be the mausoleum. He recollects the dream he previously experienced, and becomes intensely enraged once more, believing Souther awaits him. But he requires your strength to exact retribution for what transpired with House Varge. You will have to compel the dragon, or heed its words, and recollects that something occurred with that dragon on the battlefield, and thus he instantly understands, and draws his blade, and contemplates that somehow he has been reborn as Eren, and begins to recall all that power from before, and surmises that Sodra must possess some knowledge. And so, he commands everyone to prepare to enter the mausoleum, and now they proceed into the cavern, where the mausoleum is likely situated, and within it there are numerous crystals. Very well, and before the feline detects a scent, and strains to hear any sound, he declares confidently that it's definitely there. Meanwhile, he marvels at the incredible nature of this skill. Eren explains that it's indeed the Orcish sense, able to perceive atmospheric currents and locate water sources. Their sensitivity is ideally suited for this situation. Upon arrival, they encounter something peculiar. He inquires of Kratu about the nature of the anomaly. The mage confesses to sensing something unusual. As he ventures forward, it reveals itself to be a spirit. Having never encountered spirits before, they're utterly astonished. He now arrives at a radiant waterfall. The mage announces the presence of spirits, aquatic entities inhabiting this location. Aaron questions the meaning of aquatic spirits and inquires about their potential danger. The mage assures him that they pose no threat. However, this cavern is almost entirely devoid of life, energy, and it's a unique location, inaccessible, due to the divine protection of the earth god. And they shouldn't be here. He contemplates this, and Kira inquires whether they should depart. But the map indicated that there's a stairway concealed behind the waterfall. Perhaps that's the exit. Elle gazes intently at the area behind the cascading water and remarks on a gleaming object within. It resembles a dish, but the creature doesn't comprehend his words. However, as he observes, the water begins to reshape itself, and when they realize it, they are bewildered by what's occurring. Elle is utterly astonished, inquiring what manner of turtle this is. And the mage proclaims, "It's a water spirit." It immediately lunges at them, intending to strike. Meanwhile, the mage observes it must be safeguarding something valuable, he adds. Aaron wonders aloud, could there be treasure hidden here? But the mage interjects, "I notice something amidst the cascading water. That's likely what it's defending, although previously it didn't exist." This narrative of the earth god's protection wasn't present. There must be something there that's provoking the spirits to oppose us. Aaron concludes, it seems they intend to eliminate us, to safeguard the treasure. The mage concurs, indeed it appears so. Meanwhile, our young hero grows increasingly apprehensive, yet he doesn't raise his blade against the turtle. Everyone becomes anxious as he ventures forth, alone and unarmed, and so he approaches, traversing the water's surface, and implores him to remain calm. His blade is revealed, and he commands the specter to compose itself, and simply the might of that sword compels the spirit to tranquility. Afterwards, a gentle rain descends, and our young hero stands there strikingly handsome. And then, a passage manifests itself within the waterfall, and he perceives the shield bearing the Pendrick emblem. Then, Kira is observed carrying the shield, and declares that it must be a treasure. And it is undoubtedly a magnificent shield, which mends the wounds of its bearer. It even restores the health of the soldiers, and Aaron questions if this is truly real. But the mage assures him it is a benevolent force. He compelled the spirits to retreat. Then, he comprehends what was discussed yesterday, the potency of the widow's lament sword, and Elle merely gazes at it, uncertain of its true nature. He confesses his ignorance of the reason, but he sensed something, and it simply occurred. Krata remarks that his countenance appears unwell. Karta declares that this must be the might of the divine, guardian of the forest. But Killian becomes enraged, proclaiming that all of this belongs to the Pendragons. Aaron concurs, believing it to be true. Shudrick's strength is the power of the Pendragons. In other words, it's not his own ability. And once again, he experiences the recollection of Aaron's father's demise. This memory greatly angers him, but he is certain that he is Raven Vareth. After journeying for some time, he arrives at the mausoleum's entrance. Killian announces their arrival. This is it, he declares, the mausoleum, Saudrake's domain. They stand before the imposing structure. Aaron's blade begins to glow. A knight inquires, why is the widow's lament reacting this way? It's sensing something, Aaron replies. This is definitely the place. Good thing we have the sword for this, someone remarks. An explosion rips through the mausoleum's entrance. What was that? Someone shouts. What's with that mist? Aaron peers through the dissipating smoke. A figure emerges, approaching them. A knight. Eran Kriazot. But as the figure draws closer, confusion replaces alarm. It's not a knight. I guess Biscap les sleeps. Recognition dawns on him. Fatty, he exclaimed. Fatty Pendragon. And that spirit is already observing him. And so, everyone wonders if that's the ancestor, the poorly Pendragon, and why he's there. But Proto becomes contemplative, remarking that he's a translucent degenerate. He bears a striking resemblance to a phantom. But moreover, why does he recognize this man's name? And then, he experiences that same recollection of Aaron's father perish. And thus, he comprehends that these are Aaron's memories. And in this instance, Gordon was Aaron's father. And so he raises his blade, and a brilliant luminescence emerges in the heavens. And they're perplexed, unsure of what it is. But when they gaze upward, They perceive the silhouette of a dragon against the moon, and they're astonished by the spectacle. The orcs are awestruck by the dragon, and when it unveils its horns, the monsters tremble with terror. But when it reveals its eyes, Eren exclaims, "It has finally appeared!" And now the soldier standing before them lands just behind Gordon Pendragon. Now the two stand before our protagonist, and Kinha remarks, "This is truly magnificent." The orcs declare it to be a guardian entity, but the pirate remains silent, fixated on the Sodrake. Suddenly, he hears a voice inquire, "Who are you?" causing Eren to tremble to his core. He glances at the stout figure they were facing, a sword pointed at them. Gordon then demands, "Who are you?" Kilia then questions, "Do you understand what's happened?" She wonders if Lord Gordon just spoke, but the Lord declares, "That's impossible. He's merely a phantom." And Eren believes the situation remains unchanged. From when he first encountered Eren Pendragon in the Lobation Meadow, it was the identical voice that inquired about his identity. Essentially, the entity that spoke previously and the one speaking now was neither Eren nor Gordon, but rather the voice of Sodrake. And it is he who is currently conversing with him. Then, Souther inquires once more about his identity. They both appear utterly astonished as they gaze at Eren, and the boy exclaims that he is Eren Pendragon, but Souther observes him and draws closer, while internally questioning the unfolding events. However, the dragon declares that he is not Eren, and that he cannot deceive his discerning eyes. He will pose the question once more, "Who are you?" Consequently, he begins to experience flashbacks of witnessing the demise of his parents. In this instance, Eren's father. And later, when he was thrown to the demons and ultimately slain by his commanding officer, who was orchestrating everything against them, he begins to suffocate and can't speak amidst the immense pressure. He fails to comprehend why his head is throbbing so intensely and feels like it's splitting apart. He contemplates his true identity while the Sudra glares at him with overwhelming force. Then his companions inquire about his well-being, and the Sudra, gazing at him, once again questions who he is. But our protagonist becomes frantic and struggles to articulate properly. He recalls his time as Raven Varith, all the things they inflicted upon him, but doesn't understand why these memories are relentlessly surging forth, because he doesn't want to witness them again. The recollections of when he was thrust into a demonic form and subsequently had to confront numerous beasts, and ultimately his charge to safeguard Eren Pendragon. In this he comprehends that the dragon is displaying these memories to him. And it's Souther who inquires once more, "Who are you?" And he, utterly distraught, is uncertain what to articulate, but possesses fragments of Eren's past. And he perceives the Duke's wife and the corpulent Duke himself, and then her cradling an infant who is Eren. And he knows it is not him, but rather Eren, who is frolicking with the knights and recounting tales to his sisters, later weeping at his father's deathbed. And when he conjures an image of a knight astride a steed, and that indeed is Eren, and immediately following these recollections, he commences to expectorate blood, which leaves everyone apprehensive for his well-being. But the colossal dragon still looms before him, and inquires once more as to his identity. And the protagonist, hemorrhaging, softly utters that he is Ravenvar. But then, he reminisces about awakening as Eren Pendragon, and beyond that, he was profoundly concerned for himself. And subsequently, his two sisters came to visit him, both Eri and Mia. And also when Eren's mother embraced him, and shortly thereafter, when he encountered those grotesque creatures and subsequently battled the orcs. And when he stood before that accursed, corpulent man, alongside his knights, and contemplates that these are his memories. And his companions continue to implore him to persevere. And Killer declares that they must safeguard Lord Eren, even if it means their demise. As the orc declares they have no alternative, the orc mage intervenes, stopping him. He draws a card and inquires if he intends to defy the guardian deity. He proclaims they battled one another, and he triumphed. Therefore, he is his comrade, and if circumstances persist, he will perish. But Eren continues to hemorrhage. Finally, he comprehends his purpose and identity. Rising, he addresses Sodrake as the dragon confronts him, now leaning on his blade before Sodrake. He declares that he is the rightful heir to the Pendragon Duchy. Eren Pendragon bellows with all his might, and the dragon is astonished, with him speaking in such a manner. And our lad is there completely battered. But in this way, that Gordon, who was gazing very seriously at him, finally cracks a smile. His spirit dissipates, while Eren remains clueless as to why he vanished. And so Sodra lifts his head and unleashes a mighty roar towards the moon, which sends everyone flying with the gale force wind. and leaves them bewildered about what's happening, because that roar is incredibly potent. And thus he ceases and draws closer to Eren and declares, "The oath is fulfilled, Eren, Pendragon, and also Ravenvar." And so he concludes by stating that someone like him will succeed the Pendragons. And finally, both Ravenvar and Eren Pendragon, they successfully breached the mausoleum and forged a pact with the White Dragon, Sodrake. This act will completely upend this world. And after this, his companions rush to his aid, but he implores them to halt and not worry, because he is unharmed. He proclaims that the oath is finally fulfilled, and he has been chosen by Sodrake. Hugo leaves them astonished momentarily, but then joyful, they erupt in celebration, declaring that Eren is the chosen one, and the destiny of Pendragon is secured. The orcs announce that from now on they are unified with the guardian deity, and this is a momentous triumph. Carteo declares that he is the only one who can vanquish them, but then Souther lifts his head once more, and Eren is bewildered by what has transpired and inquires about what transpired. He responds that a guest has arrived, but when he gazes out, he initially perceives birds descending from the heavens, but shortly after, he becomes utterly terrified, and everyone else also discerns the true nature of the spectacle. And as they observe, numerous dragons materialize, commencing to encircle Sodrake and Eren. Meanwhile, our protagonist remains incredulous that there are 6 dragons that are staring directly at them, and thus they descend and surround. Tada and the couple begin to tremble with fear, and our young man fails to comprehend the unfolding situation. But the voice of one of the dragons inquires if this is the queen's new contractor. This instantly startles Eren as he looks towards that dragon, and Sodrake confirms, stating, "Indeed, Mealy Arte, and I did not summon them." "Then why," she questions, "have they arrived here? My oath with the Pendragons bears no connection to them." From behind, another dragon interjects. No, this time it is Souther, whose true name was Gudgeon. He declares, "We have come because we are obligated," he states firmly, "and the queen should comprehend the reason." Souther glares at them and inquires, "Do you possess the authority to question?" The dragons exchange glances amongst themselves. One dragon advances toward her and proclaims, "However, I perceive something more within this human, unrelated to his aura alone, but rather to both auras of the demon god and the dragon god. Both auras reside within this human." And at this moment, the soldier who begins to roar at them, which once again frightens all of Eren's soldiers, and the dragons are quite astonished by this. And now the soldier confronts them and declares that they are unwelcome guests, and commands them to depart from their territory immediately. And she orders them to leave as the Dragon King. And when Eren looks, he doesn't comprehend what she just uttered. What does she mean, Dragon King? And they understand, as another approaches and states that they will be leaving today. However, should these humans ever return to this land, everything will become clear. With that, they begin to take flight and depart. Meanwhile, Carta inquires about what just transpired, and Kazare remarks that it seemed they were conversing. While Mago mentions the voices, the majestic roars of dragons can only be perceived by those who have established a connection, a dialogue with them. He was able to discern her voice, channeled through the esteemed Lord Gordon, before the sacred oath was solemnly sworn. But now, an unnerving silence had descended, a profound deafness. Eren found himself pondering a disquieting thought. Had he been the sole recipient of this ethereal communication? Was he alone in hearing her voice? However, it was the voice of the Souther that had truly ceased, fallen utterly silent. Immediately following the completion of the oath, its final utterance extinguished. Setting aside this perplexing mystery for the moment, he contemplated the existence of 6 formidable dragons, a dragon king of immense power, and a demon king of equally formidable might. A vast expanse of the unknown stretched before him, filled with unanswered questions. Perhaps, he surmised, the Dragon Queen possessed the knowledge he sought. He was convinced that she must hold the key to these enigmas. His own resurrection as Eren. This very fact, he approached, a query forming on his lips, directed at the Souther Drake, requesting, with utmost respect, if she might lower her majestic head. The strain of constantly gazing upward was beginning to weary his neck. His simple request elicited a visible expression of astonishment. She responded, indicating a more efficient method. Azure flames vibrant and intense, began to envelop her form. Her spectral essence started to dissipate, fading from view. Confusion rippled through the onlookers, their faces etched with bewilderment. Had she vanished completely? The question hung heavy in the air. A blinding flash momentarily obscured their vision, a burst of intense light. As the brilliance subsided, Aaron's eyes fluttered open. Collective gazes swept the area. Where had the Souther Drake gone? The question was on everyone's mind. A voice pierced the silence, declaring her continued presence. I am here. Aaron's gaze was directed skyward, toward the Souther Drake's previous lofty position. Lowering his line of sight, he witnessed a transformation unfolding before his very eyes. The Dragon Queen materialized, assuming her human form. And then she descended, magnificent wings unfurled, radiating an aura of immense power. The Dragon Queen Souther Drake, revealed in all her glory. A wave of astonishment washed over the onlookers, leaving them speechless. Disbelief etched their features as they struggled to comprehend the spectacle before them. Even I was left, utterly stunned by the breathtaking appearance of the Dragon Queen. Dragon Queen. To continue following this captivating saga, be sure to generously bestow likes upon this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you seek a haven for reading, whether it be your cherished manga or other literary delights, I wholeheartedly recommend Manhwa. Assuming this is a platform/app, it's available completely free of charge on the Google Play Store. You'll find a convenient link in the description below and also pinned as the top comment. To provide financial support to the channel, you can join our esteemed community of members. Details regarding pricing and benefits are displayed on screen. A supplementary video is provided here just to the side for your viewing pleasure. And that concludes our segment for today. I'll take my leave now. Until the next video, farewell.